generals with, of course, Hearts of Iron 4. No mods. We're playing as Germany. And I'm back at it again, yes. Right. Well, we're going to see about intervening in Spain. Okay, I want to just take the 3rd Panzer Division and move it to this unit here. And now let's see about giving it a general. Not that many generals. Just make sure everything is working in the various. Currently just streaming on Twitch and YouTube, but want to see that we're actually streaming on there. Right. Okay. No Ritter von Thoma to put in charge. That's a bit of a bummer. Who do we put in charge? He has a lot of capabilities. Blind arms expert. Luntz. I guess we can put Luntz in charge. Okay, so see if we can send some volunteers. They're heading out to Spain. Okay, and we have factories available. Okay, expanding the Luftwaffe has been completed, which Kriegsmarine. Okay, we wanted to come to here, I believe. Get us a military factory, and bomber. Just looking at the options here. And hello, Arno. Good to have you here. Yeah, let's do Aeronautical Research Institute. I was thinking of getting that. And hello, Arno, over on YouTube. Arno's a great moderator for my channel. I don't make use of him enough as it is, but he is great. You're in Spain. We are in Spain. Let's Let's move to here. We have an armored unit and an infantry unit. Okay, we helped them by defending from attack. We're actually attacking. We're going to clean up the Bilboa pocket, which is here. They've already taken Bilboa, but we'll help clean it up. Now, let's political advisors. Spies, that wouldn't be bad. Really, I just... You know, how do I put this? This is a game. I understand that this is a game. I understand it's not... a simulation, both in the sense of it's not 100% real, but it's also meant to be a game and not trying to be a simulation, if you get my meaning. And one of the design components, who is really the real designer, was Podcat, lead designer. And one of the things he expressed was choices. To make it a game, to make everything, is to have choices. So you can't have everything, and I get that. But to... Hello, Jamnuska, good to have you here. But to have a... take a step backwards is one thing, that I don't like. In the old... in Hearts of Iron 3, which... I just, my life has been upside down and other things. I do want to do at least one or two more playthroughs of it, detailed playthroughs, but it'll take a lot of modding time, and I'm just not ready to put that in the time in right now in my life. But I still think it has things that this doesn't. One of them is a more complete cabinet, and I could say it that way. I think legitimately more complete, not 100% complete, maybe, depending on how you look at it. And even there, you see, and I'm sitting down here, thinking about all of this and how. What I want to say is, long before Hearts of Iron was ever created, way back when playing Third Reich, an Avalon Hill game, board game, thinking about early computer games and what I would do. One of the things I design concepts, and hey, if there's anybody rich enough, whether it's a design studio or a somebody who wins the lottery, or hey, Elon Musk, hi, if you happen to be watching this, if you ever want to have truly a great grand strategy World War II game, I can help design it. I can't program it. I could learn a little bit, but I no, not program it. I can help design it. One of the design elements was a layered element to the game that would offer several options, but what it would do is have, I don't know, it depends on how you're looking at in different areas, 2 to probably 3 most likely, but somewhere between, because in layers you gotta have at least 2 to 5 layers in the game, so that if you wanted to, you could automate almost everything except for maybe the top layer. And I say that, but maybe even the top layer and of the game, and you can drill down into it. And what I say like that is, why would you even win a game other than you can, uh, obviously you could watch it play out, but why would you want everything automated? Um, well, we can look at this as one of the things I wouldn't mind doing is automating, in a detailed playthrough that I would play, is automating like the Navy for Germany. That you only really want to, at some level, start to deal with is when you're doing a naval invasion. You know, so mostly it would be like, oh, hey, yeah, just let, U-boats and commerce raiders and what where they're going to operate. I'm not saying necessarily. Well, you could maybe drill down as to what, whether you're using hexes or just irregular shapes like this. I don't mind irregular shapes at all. What different units move specifically into, or just say, hey, operate in this area, or just like who do you in. And I would, who do you put in charge? And so this is part of the thing, is who do you put in charge of the Navy, which um, helps determine your naval strategy. Do you have Raider in charge, or do you have um, Donuts in charge, or somebody else in charge? That, sure, it may have quote unquote skill levels that are somehow useful in the game, you know, um, with bonuses or whatever. But mostly, that's how focused are we on um, naval building priorities and things like that. So to have levels to drill down. So if you go in and say, let it all sort of um, handle it at mostly even almost nearly the top level of handling naval operations, because I don't want to be messed with that, and I only want to handle top level uh, operations for the Air Force, meaning setting priorities, and then letting the AI. And this is back like in the '80s, guys, that I had this idea for a game. Is to, okay, well, let I set priorities for the Luftwaffe, at the top level, but let the lower level, as you're moving on the Eastern Front, it's planning and doing all the operations. You're just saying, okay, hey, put X number of fighters or X number of air units that would then, of course, have a certain amount of fighters. Though you're operating and supporting the Eastern Front, you're defending Germany. Your other units are fighting down in the Mediterranean. And sort of you're hello, Turinlo. Good to have you here. So and then where I would want to play much more detailed would be, basically move every single division or whatever scale is you're playing at um, on the Eastern Front, or maybe any front, and so micromanage that, so that this way um, you you could be able to micromanage, but also, and I will get to the chat, guys. Don't worry. You could micromanage something, these, this division attacks here while these two attack this other place, and micromanage everything on the Eastern Front, micromanage everything, say, in North Africa going on, and set a lot, at least for the army, uh, production priorities and things like that. Um, and so that you can have, like I say, let the U-boat war take care of itself, and only generally manage the air war and whatever. Or you can, not just for, could be for casual players, but more so for people not to be overwhelmed in playing this game. In that, I know I'm talking game design philosophy here, but hey, um, but that you can, instead of, and this was what, when I was a kid, trying to learn a rule book was terrible for me. But if I could go play with it, because all these games that I really wanted to play were played by adults. If I could, so if I could have an adult explain to me the rules as I sort of needed to know them to play the game, I could learn them pretty well, and then really only use a rule book um, as a reference, or looking up some detailed elements of it, or learning something more. So, meaning, if I could get an adult to come in and go, here's this, you do this other thing, you got to remember to always do this and check that. And, as you go through and play it, and I would absorb it. And then, whether still playing with them or just playing otherwise, often, as a kid, against myself, if you will, just to be able to play it at home because there wasn't enough opponents out there. I could look things up as I needed to. Well, it's sort of like that, in that you can learn how to do things, generally speaking, and then as you play more and more and better, you can play it at a more detailed level if you wish, or if you just wish to it on certain things to dig down. So you have comfort levels. I did not really, in those eras with this, in the game design, have, like, well, I know this is like to move your country to a communist thing, so that's just sort of a stupid element in my opinion. But is have different stats, so much for, maybe some stats for these type of, cabinet and other positions. It wasn't so much to have character stats, though I don't think it's a bad idea, because, and I could go into multiple reasons, I'm not going to here, but not so much to have character stats, but I was wanting to, for my design concept was, for each sort of area, which could be just like aircraft production, or could be just fighter production, or, however far you wanted to drill down into it. You could have three basic settings. One would be manual, in which, obviously, the player, um, could even be players. With the game that I'm talking about, you could easily go, oh, well, we're going to have four people play. One's going to play as the head of the Army, one's going to play as head of the Air Force, and one's going to play as head of the Navy. Or something like the U.S., one's going to be commanding the Navy in the Atlantic, and one's going to be commanding the Navy in the Pacific. You could have multiplayer kind of thing like that, which could be really fun because, especially, I played the U.S. in Hearts of Iron games already, and I will play again. But this is sort of the boss nation, if you will. And, how do you win in World War II? Oh, well, you just do what the U.S. does. And sure, you could fine tune it, and sure, if, the war goes differently at some point or another, it means you got to make different decisions. But if you, instead of having this as the boss nation to defeat, if you will, in one way or another, have it out here as something in which you have, I don't know, 20 players, You're playing against a huge number of AIs, or of course, if you have even more people playing, and nowadays with remote, hi guys in Europe like Arno and others, you can have global players. Um, so it's not just in your town, city, or wherever finding enough players. You can have huge number of people playing the game. Um, but it would be really interesting, because you can, historically, MacArthur's plan and Nimitz's plan and whatnot, just for America out in um, the Pacific. But if you were to have two naval guys, one naval guy being sort of Nimitz, and the other naval guy being whoever was the main admiral or whoever you want to make the main admiral, who's going to support MacArthur. And Nimitz, who is mostly naval with some marine divisions, and then added a bit later some army divisions added to him. He's doing all the island hopping, but also the strategic naval stuff. And so these guys are playing maybe sitting in a room, whether virtual or actual room, and then of course you have maybe a naval guy who's running the American convoy system, who may deal with the British guy who's running the British convoy system, as well as another naval American guy who's micromanaging other naval operations that are not convoys in the Atlantic. I know, as it turns out, obviously, there's virtually no surface warfare battles of just about any sort that are going on in the Atlantic that aren't just like convoy defense. But it could have gone different. Obviously, you have the great movies. Particularly one, Sink the Bismarck, and then there's also, I forget what the movie was called, that dealt with the Graf Spee. So before the Americans get in, there are significant naval operations going on, not large battles, but significant and important naval operations that are going on beyond just figuring out and developing convoys. The Americans are of course, doing a lot of shore bombardment and naval operations for amphibious warfare. You could easily have that, and that's just a naval war without, the army guys, hey, we need more of this, ships or more escorts or more shore bombardment, or hey, we need to have a carrier assigned here because we need that air support on these operations. And so you could have a game that's as much a game that's dealing with real human to real human negotiating, like you did in World War II, resource allocations, if you will. Game discussing resource allocations, yeah. How many armored divisions here versus armored divisions there? How much supply is showing up here or there, and all this kind of stuff. And, for the guys that are scheduling convoys and whatnot, there would be plenty for them to do without, they can, of course, obviously have paper to take notes or something, but, having things done in the computer. And so you're playing that kind of game as well as playing the actual, battling it out game in the computer. And it could be fascinating and very fun to have all of that going on. And especially if you were to really fill the major nations up, and to see how everybody's running the war. So that would be one setting, is to be able to set however much in whatever field into manual. And then because it wasn't just like ministers and whatnot, it was also production and training, in the more military sense, and in the bureaucrat sense, not just political sense. But okay, so that one setting. Then another setting would be historical, and it, as much as practical, that setting for whatever field. It would try to meet historical targets, if you will. Obviously, especially if you're talking about something like Germany, where you have factories destroyed or whatever, that's affecting things. But, on a simple level, historical, if you hit something like historical to the Luftwaffe production, it would try to run down, and you have obviously a human that originally sets it up. And like I say, sometimes some aircraft, like I forget what it was called, I've read it, but the Germans were getting ready to produce their own version of the Mosquito, and then the factory gets bombed, and the people who knew how to make the glue formula, because to glue the wood together, because it's a wooden aircraft, it's a lot of glue, and it's not just glue two pieces of wood together, which yes, it's that too, but it's also I think using laminated wood and gluing the laminations together. So it's not like, oh well, instead of glue it, we could use screws or nails. It was being able to do the lamination properly and whatnot. And the formula was only kept in one place, so it was gone. I find this incredibly weird that there between the humans who knew how to do it and the written formulas were in such a point of failure that one bombing raid could take that entirely out. It wasn't in 2 or 3 locations, big, different cities, different places, somewhere in, some development factory, somewhere in some art, or in 2 or 3 places in archives, and, whatever. But, so obviously they didn't produce any of these aircraft, but other than maybe a prototype or something. But, to have, and that's just one illustrative story, but, if you bomb a fighter factory, obviously historically that reduces the amount of fighters versus other things. But you try to figure out what the historical averages are, and you can set it for history, and it'll crank out, unless you tell it differently, set something on manual or kind of thing, it'll try to do the historical priorities. Or 3, it did have an element of you put a particular personality in charge of a thing, which could be automating the Eastern Front. And it wasn't, my design didn't have like divisional generals, but that's a great idea too. But would have, theater generals and like army or corps and type generals. And if you were to put, and you were to say history, well, then it would try to follow the basic plans. Try to get to Moscow, try to get to Leningrad, try to secure the Ukraine, and try to follow the basic plan of Barbarossa. That would be, one automated option. Or you could go, I'm going to turn it over to the generals. And who do I put in charge? Now, if you put the same historical leaders in charge that were in charge in Barbarossa, well, it's going to sort of kind of follow that plan. But, as the operation goes on, the old do we keep pushing for Moscow, or do we do big encirclements argument and stalling and whatnot and fighting over that? Well, that could be solved simply by who you're putting in charge, and they will follow that kind of plan. Or it would, be that person's production priorities or whatever. So it was 3 basic settings. Is how I would have designed. There's several other design elements in my game that I have in my head that haven't been done. So yeah, it could be something that you could just know enough about to sort of kind of play it, and have the AIs handle a lot of other elements of it, or you can dig deeply into all kinds of elements of the game. So yeah, I could do that. Now, and what got me on this is what do I pick here? And there's so few political advisors. I I really think here Shaq is not hired as an advisor. So do we want to go to here? I think keeping within the design, I actually it's may still actually be up somewhere, but don't try to use it unless you really have an old version of the game. I did create, though it wasn't full for all the nations by any means. I did create a an attempt at um, creating a Hearts of Iron 3 type cabinet in which you have a foreign minister, you have a production minister, you have a internal security minister, and then you pick from a selection list. Let's see what the chat has been saying while I've been monologuing here. Yes. Need a black ice mod for Hoi 4. Maybe there is one now, but I haven't played. Yeah, there is a black ice for Hoi 4. It's been out for a lot longer than a year. My biggest problem with this, and I have an epic rant that's a few years old. That's sort of when I stopped playing it, I think, as one of several rants. The big problem with there's a big problem with Hearts of Iron 4. Its AI sucks. Okay, or I should say the combat AI sucks. Paradox, and I haven't played their other more recent games, since Vicky 3 or whatever is out, and whatever, and I don't know how it's changed this, but Hearts of Iron 4 and before, Paradox can do rather decent AIs that create reasonably good doom stacks and move around the map. So EU whatever, whichever version, is pretty good because armies were, you have the Battle of Waterloo, out here in France, or well, in Belgium, but obviously coming up from France. You don't have the French front. I mean, yeah, if you look at with Quatre Bras and whatever, the 4 days, it is sort of a campaign, but it's sort of a, an allied doom stack, a Prussian doom stack, and a French doom stack that are fighting each other. It's not holding the front. And this is one of the reasons I think they've gone to fewer provinces here, is because they don't have a good AI to manage a front. When I and others, it's not just, oh, I'm so brilliant or anything, pushed in the early stages back in beta before the game was released. Let's do the ability to have planned AI plans, or your battle plans, I should say, battle plans. No, those are too formulaic. No, those once the player figures out what the AI battle plan is, they'll know how to defeat it. And then it was brought up by myself and others. I don't want to try to take sole credit. Well, hey, why don't we create a GUI and allow players to create battle plans, save the battle plans with conditional elements to it, and then they could submit them. And of course, your development team could have a few sets of battle plans. And then if you sort of go, oh, well, I know the battle plan here and I know the battle plan there, or the 2 or 3 battle plans they use, and once I detect which battle plan they're using, I can win. Well, have other people out there create other battle plans, and then you can have add them, via mods, if you will, and then have a weighted system that picks the different battle plans. Some plans may be highly unlikely, the plan to invade England via Scotland, instead of coming across in the south or something, something that could be chosen, but wouldn't be chosen, most likely, could be, but, it has a 1% chance or 5% chance to be chosen. compared to several battle plans that are, coming down here in the South. And no, we just want a good AI. And I think I said, what have you done that has shown that you can make a good AI? And to my knowledge, they haven't. And I'm playing this here, and I'm going to see how this goes to see if their AI has improved. Oh no, well we're going to get better at that. Blah 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 blah. Bullshit. They're not. I don't know if it's AI, and it's AI technology that can fit into my computer with my processor and my amount of memory. You can talk. Elon Musk is talking about all these great AIs that are coming out within just a few years, and whatnot with all of that. And he may not be wrong, but it's how much compute process do you have? Do I have this one computer, or do I have, a small mainframe type computer that has, an operating system that runs 30 of whatever, CPUs in it, they're networked together that then those 30 CPUs, because yes, they're central processing, but for each like motherboard, that each has 4 GPUs that mostly aren't doing graphics, that are just doing other processes that are having all that stuff run. Yeah, okay. With that processing power, we may be able to write an AI code that maybe even learns game after game after game, so it gets better. And you have to just sort of have manual settings that make it smarter or not as smart to your ability to play against it. Yeah, that may be doable right now to this day. But even the best coders out there with the greatest will in the world might not be able to create a decent combat AI that my computer that I have here, and again, most people have, that's, well, let's be realistic nowadays with memory prices and GPU prices and whatever else going on, is 3,000. I'm just talking the box, not monitors and keyboards and other things, but just the box is under $3,000 or something. And I know that's an damn expensive computer, just as a basic computer, but it's $3,000 or less. Could that even be done? I don't know, but I do know that the computer can go, oh, I've got 20 different plans to invade France under a 1940 type thing, some that invade, don't invade Belgium but does invade Luxembourg, or some that does invade Belgium but doesn't invade Netherlands, or sort of setting it the world that it's going to look at, and then have a weighted chance. Oh, hey, 30% is this one really good plan, Fall Geld, and then have 70%, divided up 70%, but divided into multiple things that are other plans. Some, like I say, may just have a 1 or 2% chance to do it. Others maybe 5-10% chance, and then at some point the AI would evaluate, hey, is the plan successful or not, with its contingencies in, and it's showing, hey, yes, it's successful. Well, then let's keep following on until we end the plan. Or, oh, hey, the plan is not successful. What are my reevaluations of it? Do we continue with the plan, or do we, go look at the 6 plans that are here for current situation, that somebody's, developed? France has taken Frankfurt, in 1940 or something. What do we do? What do we do if this, okay, this is not working out well. The AI realized that my plan has fallen apart. What do we do if there's a major French incursion? What battle plan options do we have? And then it picks one of those kind of things. I think we have AI that could handle that, but no, it did not want to. The Paradox people did not want to do it. So Black Ice and a few other mods that I played, I think also Total War and some others, they compensate for this by putting ridiculous buffs and debuffs and ridiculous um, fortifications that weren't on, didn't exist, and ridiculous seasonal conditions that happen, make it so it's sometimes, it's literally bashing your head against the wall to try to go on offensives and such. And I'm sorry, and I would be very willing to take another look at something like Black Ice nowadays because it has been so long. But if they're still trying to use that to give the player challenge, in something like Black Ice, and people can make people can make any mod they want. That's perfectly fine for them. But the mod I want is not a mod that's trying to give me, the player, more challenge. I'm looking for a mod that gives me a more rich historical perspective. Meaning if the combat AI sucks, it sucks. Okay? If it sucks, it sucks. If just simply I'm a human and I can bash through the Soviets because the Soviet AI will do stuff too stupid no matter, and so I can always out there, well then too bad. That's an AI problem. Then of course I would like AI mods that could be better to fight me. Or if I want to get a mod that makes the Soviet Union stronger by giving it 3 times the amount of divisions and resources and all this stuff to balance out against the human player. If I want that, I can do that. Or, of course, if I have a really great mod, then I can just try to invite a few of you to play with me. And that way we have human players around, and it's human players versus human players and not trying to do that. So that's my sort of mini rant on some of these mods that do a lot of good things, but do just 1 or 2 major significant things that I just can't stand. That's one of the things, because what really got me to stop playing Hoi 4 was the mods and their attempts at making the game more challenging. And that's not what I was looking for. Let's see. Now I have to check on Hoi 3 Black Ice mod has done in the last year. Yeah, it was going down some paths that I didn't like. They were really helpful. They reduced the size of battalions in the division. So long since I've been playing this. Edit these. It reduced down the number of sizes and battalions. And they actually helped me quite a bit, and I almost got stuff done, but my life, like I say, turned upside down. And going in and editing it so everything, not just the player, but also the AIs, would make their older size divisions. And that's something that really irked me that they went down. I don't know their current status. And I want to say the guys that were working, and I forget the names right offhand, they were actually helping me make a sub mod to their mod, or my Third Reich events, adding a component to it that modified what they wanted to do. And obviously my work with Third Reich events, and it was expanding beyond just events, but it was maintaining what I one of the things I really loved about them is to be able to have a larger number of battalions, which of course includes like support units within the battalion, or not battalion, but within the division. To have that, and there were a little bit of help from other people too, but not enough to keep it going for me to get it done. But and including not just going in and adding that back in, but adding, if you will, the AI template so that the enemy also builds divisions that strong, if you will, as opposed to just Germany smashes everybody because everybody else is weak. No, it was to balance it all out. And I don't know what they've done since, good or bad. They were doing some good work, but for me to really want to play it, I started casually. I would need to do a deep dive, figure out what's going on, what what I like, because for me that game is even more time consuming than this, and more time consuming than just me talking about all this stuff and pausing. Um, to want to Because I've done so much work in it, to really want to do that, I need to do a deep dive and get everything going, and that's weeks of work for me to do that. I don't mean it take a few weeks to get the work done. I mean weeks of work, not hours, not days, but weeks. And it may take me 3-4 months to get that few weeks of work done. As in however many hours there are in a week. I guess I could do the math. 7 times 24. But is to do all of that. Time to get that done. I have the skills, or I could relearn the skills because it's just been so long, and get that done. But I just, with all the stuff going on in my life, I just don't have that time, and it's not gonna happen anytime soon. And I don't know if I want to put myself through playing it without doing that. So, yeah, I love, at least when I was last playing, except for that reducing down the size of divisions, and have a really great time with Hoyth 3 would be lovely as well. Okay, let's go. Too many games. Trying to resist buying Menace. Okay, don't know the game. Resist this stuff. Good. Solved problem that took 3 hours longer than it should have because true doesn't equal true because Boolean values. Okay, yes, that is some of the elements that I hate with programming, and why I just, basically refuse to do much programming, even like I do, like I was saying, reprogramming stuff, just minor surface stuff. And basically I need to be showed an example of the code, and then I can go in and make the changes. So I need somebody to hold my hand on, at least, like I say, telling the production AI to build divisions that look like, what I like, an X, like I want it to do. Show me how to do it for one nation, and then I'll go in and change the values, etc., etc., and do that, and do all the grunt work or whatever to get it all done in all the other nations. Once I know a verified version of the code, and tell it to, because it's not just telling it to do it to an infantry division, telling it what to do for a number of battalion, or brigade, or whatever you want to call it, armored division, and the mountain division, and this division, and that division, and once I know the basic code phrase, I can go in and give it the examples. I can do a lot of the work, but I do need somebody to hold my hand. That's why I don't plan on doing this. Hello, General Field Marshal 7. How you doing? What's the plan of the campaign? Yeah, mostly historical. For those that are sort of new here, and hello, Robert Coleman. How you doing? This campaign I know we haven't gotten very far in it, and a lot of ranting from me. Hope it's interesting. This campaign was just sort of a what do I play tomorrow thing that a few weeks ago now. What do I play tomorrow for the live stream? And well, let's try Hoi 4. So this is just mostly trying Hoi 4. Get to war economy as quickly as you can by sending advisors. Yes. Oh, we need to send advisors too. That's right. We have volunteers. Send attaché. Yes. They will not accept. Don't know. Sending our attaché is declined by the nationalists. I don't know why they decline our. We have our. Okay, maybe there's something, I don't know. I don't know why they didn't like that. Um, but yes. And hello, Elipsid? Is that how you pronounce it? I don't know, so I don't mean to butcher it. There has been one for since, yeah, pre-COVID. There's been a lot of black ice out there. But I totally missed it. Been playing Hoi 3 way more, just haven't checked with Hoi 4. Need to retry it, I guess, yes. Okay, yes, there's a lot. Like I say, and someday I'll dive back into mods for Hoi 4, but not just yet. If I, we'll see how far I get on this campaign. Don't be too disappointed if you go, hey, I just quit. At some point, um, not necessarily because of rage quit, just because I've relearned to play with a lot of new mechanics and by some of the newer. This is the free DLCs. This is fully, you know, updated, but there are some good DLCs to pay for if I'm really actually going to play it. So I may start over again in a while. So for a real sort of campaign to get involved in and for people to follow. See amount of divisions. Okay, let's see. Oh, reading horrible menace reviews. Okay. Also the amount of divisions per core, but could never increase the amount of attached with tech over time. Okay. Playthrough needs a lot of time, especially when war is on. Absolutely. Finish Hoi 4 and invaded the U.S. 1 year post 1939 past. Yes. Play a lot. And hello, Robert Coleman. I did need to increase relations. Get war support up. Yes. Once war support is 35, you can get war economy. Okay. Yeah, and it's like I say, it's been more than 2 years since I played this game. So, um, yeah, a lot to learn, relearn to play it well. Glad him. Okay. That division's about to collapse. Nowhere for it to retreat. We're doing okay. Still in 1936 because I talk too much. Buckle Research Institute is done. Let's do maneuver warfare. Okay, we have another military factory available. Well, let's do improved light tech. Get those into production. You may need to. This will help with some of the resources, experiments. Those are better done in 30. 11. Oh, we can do better. Interwar artillery. Growing concerns over rearmament, we must find alternative funds. Look at the AI. I can't even figure out if it wants to attack there or not. We're down to 1 division. Panzer division's about ready to stop attacking. Uranus Mountainous, yeah, that's not the best. Chinese United Front forms, okay, they're also mountainous, but defending in the urban zone. Building up our industry. Yeah. Okay, well, we want to use our research relatively efficiently. Russian legacy done. Fatherland. Let's come back over here. Two civilian factories. Let's do that. Okay, we don't have what projects. Flamethrower, spare Gustav. That's yes. Neither of those do I really want to do. Radar we could do. Okay. What? And I think it's a national focus. Sort of one of the things that was. Which one for the Yugstaffel? Does somebody know which one would give me a aerodynamics and avionics facility building? Or is it, again, that's like I haven't been playing, is it, here we go. This is what I need to build. Okay, never mind. I figured it out. Yay. Okay, I need to build one of these. You have up to one of these buildings per state. So, okay, facility. So I need to build one of those. A free one, unsure on Germany. I thought there, because I've read about things over the years now with development. I just was unsure. I knew I needed those types of things that they were in the game, but just where were they? Mechanical computing. All right. Just got that. Directed for ships. Maybe do that. No, I was just here looking at these divisions and what I'm going to... Well, let's go with maintenance company. We're attacking into the mountains again, but and avionics needs for radar, and radar project will spawn for free state avionics facility. Yeah, I can sort of figure some of this stuff out sometimes. There we go. Fully clean this up so the AI can start dealing with main Republic in Spain. Now, I believe history repeats itself. I know some people say, well, history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. That's just playing semantical word games. Basically, history repeats itself. And here I can illustrate that it repeats itself. And we can go back further, but we're only going to go back a ways historically. Let's see the dates right here. Yeah, I thought it was. Back in 1905, there was the Russo-Japanese War that broke out. A lot of causes for it. Basically, we can sort of see the post effects, after effects here from it. But Japan had already taken Korea. Japan watched. Well, once Japan was opened up by Admiral Perry and Americans, who there was a little bit of attempt to get some extraterritoriality, sort of like Hong Kong type thing, but that didn't really go very far. Mostly it was forcing the Japanese market. American imperialism, well, fine. We've been doing it forever. We're going to continue doing it. Mostly to get their markets opened up to trade and not have it closed in. China wanted to have its trade closed in too, and Europe said no. But Japan woke up from its long slumber of isolation and looked around and realized we don't want to have happen to us what's happened to China. So national consciousness decides to modernize. There are a few elements that are westernizing, like clothes. They wear Western clothes nowadays. They don't wear kimonos and, other Japanese clothing of, obviously tradition. When they do a traditional ceremony or something, absolutely they do. But I'm talking about daily basis. There is some westernization, but mostly it's modernization, keeping Japan essentially Japan. And they don't want to have it happen to them. One of the things they noticed, if you want to be a powerful empire or a powerful country, you need to have empire. Whether that's true or not is another question. But that's what they thought. So they started creating empires. This was not part of Japan. This also was barely, even if, part of China. It's sort of sitting off here, sort of its own thing. Yeah, it's somewhat culturally Chinese, but it's sort of ruled by pirates. But even then, is it just, are they pirates or are these just naval raiders, if you will, the people that lived here that for funsies, they just, were sort of their local version of Vikings, along with, of course, a lot of the people down here were pirates and Viking types that would, and I say that because sure they would take ships, but they'd also, raid each other, raid other places, for slaves and profit and fun. Ye colonies, time in the sun, yes. So Japan sees the world and decides it needs an empire, and decides it does not want to be China. China did not want to modernize. China knew that it was doing the right thing. All these other things were barbarians, and maybe once we understand something technologically, the technology will 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 incorporate, maybe, but a lot of them are just technological gizmos, mechanical clocks. We're able to run our society without mechanical clocks. What do we need mechanical clocks for? You know, and the society that they were running. Sorry, I'm plugging something in here. So I'm not looking at the microphone if I'm sounding bad. Um, so, didn't probably need mechanical clocks. Now, railways, once they start experiencing those, do they need those or not? So some technology they eventually maybe sort of wake up to. But they know they don't need all this newfangled stuff. What they've been doing for thousands of years is the best you could possibly do. And if we're failing, it's just because we're not interpreting the classics right, not understanding the classics right. Very backwards looking society. And so so Japan is expanding, and of course Russia is expanding. Um, and so Russia is the sort of closest, biggest power that is a real threat to to Japan. Britain's already, if you will, Britain's mired or deep in and around the world in many places, so it's not just in Asia, but here it's already sort of doing its thing in, China and making plenty of money, sort of, exhausting its ability to expand. America really, really doesn't have the appetite for conquest outside of the American continent. Yes, hi, Canada. We still have our eye on you. And no, it isn't Trump. Trump isn't the problem. I believe it was in 1774, the army down here decided to go take Montreal or something and got their butts kicked. And in 1812, these guys up here, well, we the Americans, were having our citizens kidnapped, mostly at sea, by the British. So we decided we needed to fight them. And these guys here, well, a lot of the people up in here, what do we care about what's happening to some sailors out here? Oh, man, we could go grab up Canada. So, yeah, and we got our butts kicked. So, we got our butts kicked twice trying to invade Canada. We love you, Canada. We love you so much that we want to hug you and join us and whatnot. Um, but it's not like, hello, Flip Flop, how you doing? Good to have you here. It's not like America's evil. We want to hug you and make you love us and be part of us. Um, yeah, we've tried to take it multiple times, and someday, the less British you become, the more Americans you will become. Yes. If you don't realize it, so don't get mad at Trump. Just understand, we in the South, we're going to absorb you someday. Maybe not in my lifetime, but someday it'll happen. It's just manifest destiny, and you no longer will have the British Empire protecting you, because the British Empire is gone. Okay, so its main threat rival was Russia. So in 1905, there's the Russo-Japanese War. One of the leading elements of that war was the machine gun. Okay, don't know. I really, honestly, don't know right offhand if they had barbed wire in that war. Obviously, that barbed wire exists. It's going on, in the 1870s and whatnot in America, fencing. But I don't know if they actually figured out it was useful in war. But they definitely had the machine gun. And so that machine gun was testing out something super new. Bolt action rifles are evolutionary, okay? Earliest bolt action rifles are still what we call black powder. It was called gunpowder then, but gunpowder is too inexpansive of a term now to compare to what we call smokeless powder. Bolt action rifles started before the modern gunpowder, smokeless powder, started actually with the Dreise needle rifle before really adoption of metallic cartridges, and then you're getting metallic cartridges, and then smokeless powder, and then so that's just evolutionary. And then of course black or bolt action rifles with a magazine holding more than one bullet. The Mauser 1871 just literally put one bullet in, you close the action with a bolt action, and you fire it, and then you open it with that bolt action, you put another bullet in it. It's not too, not, I don't know even if it is more efficient than the sort of, we'll call it lever action of the Martini Henry. It's not the lever action of the Winchester repeating with a tube magazine, because the British aren't that smart. They're watching Winchester tube magazine with a metallic cartridge shooting lots of bullets, and they keep using the Martini Henry with one bullet. No. And it's even in English. They didn't have to learn to read a different language. Thing was used during the end of the American Civil War. Yeah. Well, the Americans did not use a bolt action in the American Civil War. Metallic cartridges were just in their infancy. And Smith & Wesson had the number 1, number 2, 2.5, or whatever. Those were really weak rimfire cartridges. And the early Henry cartridge was also fairly weak, and a rimfire, I believe. I believe it was rimfire, yeah. And still fairly weak. So you could, in practice, not just in theory, but in practice, sit out with a muzzle loader and stay far enough back and out of the effective range of a Henry, which is the company Henry's designing the rifles. Oliver Winchester, who's a shirt maker who sees the great potential and buys the company, so they're called Winchesters. From then on, newer models, but the Henry rifle. So those of you who don't know, I am something of a small arms aficionado. I don't know if you want to call me an expert or not, but I definitely know a lot about a small arms, and if I'm not careful, a bunch will fall on me here at my home. So yeah. So yeah, your metallic cartridges are around. Britain does, with their Martini Henry rifle, does adopt a metallic cartridge. And even the American Army never, in any real sense, adopts a lever action Winchester type rifle. Because if you want to call a rolling block, well, no, a falling block weapon, sort of like the Sharps rifle, it does adopt that, and it does adopt the Spencer rifle with multiple cartridges. But the Spencer is also in World War, or not World War, in the Civil War, and it's also a fairly weak cartridge as well, and it has the tube magazine in the buttstock. So the British do adopt metallic cartridges that are powerful. They do see the Winchester. But I know specifically from the American experience, one of the reasons they don't adopt it is, and it may be to some degree the British, but it's still stupid, is, I'm trying to get specific, this America in the 1870s, 1880s, is well developed. And parts of it are probably more developed than Europe, or at least significant. And I don't mean the island of Sicily or Sardinia or something sort of, remote. I mean except for some, Paris or whatever. This part of America is developed. There's all kinds of railway networks. Hello, Plastic Gangster. I'll get to the wall of text in a bit. It's telegraph wires running everywhere to small towns, trains going to fairly small towns. Definitely every major city is around. They have buses. Now, these are horse-drawn buses, but there were lots of bus companies. There were, if you will, want to call it light rail or trolley type systems, sort of cable car type things in cities. They're eventually building, undergrounds or subways or whatever you want to call them in here along, while London is building them. In London, places like New York or whatever are also building them. This part of America here is more or less on par with Europe. Okay, it might not have all of the cultural sophistication, but trust me, they had opera houses and whatnot, kind of things. There are, particularly San Francisco, a highly well-developed city for its time period, very highly well. In the we're not talking 1850s, we're talking 1870s, 1880s here. San Francisco is very well developed, but I'm trying to get the rest of this America is wild colonial world. And unlike, say, here, that you can get to here easy, especially once you have a steamship, like Singapore is being developed at this time, is because you're at water. And it's easy to move things on water. Here, somewhere along here, these rivers effectively become unnavigable, or just navigable in bits and pieces and seasonally and whatnot, but functionally unnavigable. So once you get past, and there's a transition period area in here, but once you get past the sort of navigable rivers, you get the Trans-Pacific Railroad, which is coming sort of through like this, and then eventually a southern one. But that's just a couple of railroads going through with a few little spars off of it. This is wild frontier. This is harder to get to effectively than at least coastal, India. We can talk maybe harder to get to up in the Himalayas and whatnot. But so they were very, very worried about, for America, the soldiers firing up too much of their ammunition, and it not just how much can a soldier carry with maybe a pack animal or two carrying a few more boxes of ammunition. They're worried about, can they get enough ammunition to the territory of New Mexico, wherever the garrisons are. They're worried about that kind of ammunition supply levels. If they have the ability to, the budget to, and all this other stuff. So I sort of get why the Americans don't do a good repeating rifle. But what is it? The Mauser 7184. I don't remember numbers well, but which I have one over in my garage. I don't have a 71. I have a 7184, which is not a conversion, but taking the 71 action and adding an underbarrel tubular magazine. I think they're the first to do it, or is it the French? I'm not sure. But their European neighbors are getting tubular magazines, and until you get, which is not too long away, is rapid happening, but they could have done so earlier. They knew about tubular magazines, and sure, a lot of Britain has that sort of frontier aspect to it, and it can be demonstrated that it is almost as fast, in a practical sense, to start with an empty gun and say shoot 8 shots out of a single shot rifle versus shoot 8 shots out of a tubular magazine rifle. because you've got to load all of those 8 rounds into the magazine. Well, early Enfields, I believe, and I know some of the early, the Krag Jorgensens that the Americans use have magazine cutoffs with the idea that under normal circumstances, you load and shoot 1 round at a time, but you keep that magazine full. So, oh shit, the cavalry are running at you, or oh shit, the enemy is charging you. Not just, you're volley firing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, but oh shit, they're coming at you. You can work that bolt action fast in sort of an emergency situation. Obviously, by World War II, basically all the magazine cutoffs are gone from any current production weapons, and it's only old legacy weapons that are sitting around in reserve or for reserve units that still, just because it's still there, have a magazine cutoff. Well, the only, it would be sort of like the Krag Jorgensen up in Norway or something, may still maintain it. But, and Eric can correct me if I'm wrong about if they still had magazine cutoffs on their Krags. I don't know. So why the British don't get do early on do the in the 1880s do a tubular magazine, or before, because back in the 1860s they buttstock tubular magazine for the Spencer. Now it's a little more mechanical hoops you jump through versus a tubular magazine that runs the length of the barrel. Oh yeah, and when the tube magazine is full, it makes the barrel more heavy. There's drawbacks. That's why no modern gun is going to really use a tube magazine. I can think of some experimental magazines, but you want center mass, so you have a magazine. Yeah, I know shotguns do, but shotguns are sort of in their own little subset. But I'm talking, military rifles with their box magazines in the center. There's reasons for that. Good reasons for that. So, so that's sort of evolutionary, but revolutionary. And yes, we see which is starting the revolution, is the Gatling gun, which barely makes it into the American Civil War, both at the very sort of end and basically never by the government. Basically, the very few, into combat, the very few that are used are, I believe, all private purchases by officers who just have enough money and want to buy 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever for their unit. But the Russo-Japanese War uses proper machine guns. And both Maxims, I believe, and light machine guns like the Madsen machine gun, they're being used. And this shows how war has changed. Russia, Imperial Russia at the time, obviously, realizes this change, how war has changed. And they buy lots of machine guns. At the beginning, in 1914, the nation with the highest percentage of machine guns, definitely the greatest number of machine guns, but I think also the highest percentage of at least units in the front line, is Russia. They know how important it is. Now, they also treat them as if they're gold, so they sort of keep them in reserve or in the second rank of a division, if you will, or something, instead of trying to be aggressive with them. So they're not very effectively used at the start of the war. Now, later in the war, everybody's producing as many goddamn machine guns as they can possibly produce. They realize that it's so important. And there's a few other changes, but you have a contained battlefield war that happens out, in Far East Asia, that signals at least some of the major changes to the next major wars that are going to happen. And nations don't necessarily learn their lessons. And then you have, so World War I. Then you have the Spanish Civil War, that a lot of the changes that are happening get used there. Things like radios, they're being used. Maybe not, and I don't think so, down at the platoon level so that the platoon can talk to the company commander kind of level. I think they're still using runners and pieces of paper and bugles and whatever, to communicate the charge. Somebody stands up and um, blows a bugle or fires a flare gun or something like that, as opposed to somebody on the radio that at the company or at the battalion headquarters radios to all the platoons, go, over the radio, and then they all go. They're using other sort of signaling methods, but they're definitely using radios. Ground units are talking to air units, different higher ranking or higher headquarters are talking to each other using radios. Radios are being used. Modern aircraft are being used. Tanks are being used. Effective anti-aircraft guns are being used. Not everything. Definitely not radar. That's sort of those, particularly the British, but those that have it are trying to keep it too secret. But a lot of the stuff that is going to be showing up in World War II is showing up in Spain. Seeing that the wars are changing from World War I. Germany, with its direct involvement, learns a lot of these lessons. Italy is actually more involved, but maybe doesn't. Maybe it's not that they don't learn the lessons; they just don't have the industrial capacity to like motorize their army. And I never finished it, but I have it, and it's packed away because I'm still in the massive process. Hey, Eric, did the Craig Jorgensen of Norway have the magazine cut off, and did they? I don't know if you answered it up further. And was that still a feature of the Crag? If they did so, was it still a feature of the Crag in being produced uh, in in Norway, leading up to World War II? I just wondered if they still had that feature on the Crag, on that Crag. I know the Americans had that magazine cut off, but I didn't know if Norway did. I think they did, and I think it was presumably still being produced. Um, Eric is an expert on the Crag. Um, Truly, there's a few people that are better on the planet, but not many on knowing the Crag than he is. So Germany learns the lessons and implements them. France does not. France definitely has a few observers. I don't know how many that's observing the Spanish Civil War, but they do not learn the lessons of it. They just want to evolve World War I techniques to use better equipment. Yes, did you hear Crag? I hope you understood. Did the Norwegian Crag have the magazine cut off? And was that still a feature in production rifles that were being produced in 1940 or whenever? That's what I want to know about um, Norwegian Crags. Early before you got here, I mentioned that. I thought they had it, but I wasn't sure. Um, so warfare changed not because of the Spanish Civil War, but just warfare was changing because technology was changing, and it was demonstrated and practiced in the Spanish Civil War. Okay, now I'm got to get something to drink, so I will be back, and we will continue this history repeats itself lesson. So we've had it happen twice. And Eric's reply is, well, all Crag production ended, okay, around 1928, I believe, but the magazine cutoff was always stayed. Yeah, I knew they didn't remove it if it was there. You had enough Crags. Okay, so let's see. I'll get back to the chat in just a moment. Okay, so we have two. It's happened twice. Now, I think I've demonstrated history repeats itself. We could also look at other elements of it repeating itself, meaning a smaller regional war demonstrates a real shift in warfare that then, whether it's a world war or just a series of larger wars, happened, that those that learn the lesson of it. Now we have Ukraine war. It's shown us, and I hope America is paying attention, that drones in two formats, and yes, drones have been around for, well, they go back to World War II. And I forget his name fully, his first name, but there was a bright star in this family called Kennedy. I think I'm going to tell the story mostly correctly, going from memory. The Kennedy family sort of made its money in Prohibition era, sort of being the money behind a lot of alcohol smuggling, the money behind some of the gangsters without actually being the gangsters themselves. So they got very rich. There was and it probably was Joe Kennedy, I'm guessing his name, but the father, Joe Kennedy Sr., is this very rich guy. He has plans for his eldest son, who goes into the Army Air Corps. You've probably never heard of him. He was the bright star. He was the smart one. He was the very personable one. He was going to be it. Well, I think he was flying a radio-controlled B-17 when it blows up, if I remember the story correctly. Now, what he was doing was ferrying it from one location to another. And it was designed to be a flying bomb. What they were doing was taking old, used up B-17s, that had flown however many missions, 10 missions, 20 missions, whatever it is, which was sort of used up for those aircraft, just because of all of the flak and other damaging elements to that. One of the other things they did with those older B-17s was paint them sort of like the flying circus of Richthofen's flying circus of World War I fame, with lots of colors, and they would use those airplanes to take off first before like a major bombing raid, and would fly up and start circling the maybe not circling the airfield, but circling nearby the airfield. That would be the guide aircraft for all the aircraft they're taking up to, because the Americans wanted to go in formation. So it would be, and they may even use several of them, so that the aircraft would form up around these highly identifiable aircraft that wouldn't have any bombs in them, and get their formation set, and then that aircraft would go back and land, and then the formations would head off to Europe from Britain. So that was one of the, because they're still quite flyable, but the somewhat beat up aircraft they didn't want to quite use to go over Germany one more time, or until they just fell out of the sky on their own, from all the damages kind of thing. So because hey, just a pilot and a co-pilot or whatever taking off in this thing without all the crew, if something, wing falls off or something, maybe literally, maybe just figuratively, they could jump out with parachutes and land in friendly territory, not over the enemy's territory, and wasn't risking too many people flying the older aircraft. But one of the things was that, and there's only experimentally used, and the Germans sort of kind of was using some of these too. Well, they did have the Fritz X and some of the other wire guided bombs, launched from aircraft too. So they were using those drones in World War II. The Americans were using a radio controlled drone that they would pack one of these B-17s with explosives, which is lighter than bombs, because there's a lot of metal casing and whatnot to a bomb. And they would follow it with, follow behind it with like another B-17 or whatever that would have on board somebody with radio controls who's watching the airplane and flying that to then fly that airplane into something, into whether like a dam or a railway junction or a bridge or whatever, something that's hard to bomb or whatever, because, bombs get down. And so they were doing radio controlled radio controlled airplanes that would fly into things in World War II. And so, yeah, I think it's Joseph Kennedy Jr., I'm guessing is the name. He dies in World War II, and his younger brother almost dies out on PT 109, and he becomes the president, and then he gets killed, and then Robert F. Kennedy, his younger brother, who had been for a while Attorney General, appointed by his brother, of course, and doing his brother's bidding. So if you ever, Trump just has a Attorney General that's loyal to him. Well, Kennedy had an Attorney General that was loyal to him. He was his younger brother, doing just what his older brother wanted him to do. So don't blame Trump for anything. It's all been done before. And then he gets killed by Sirhan Sirhan, and who's a Palestinian activist. Yes, Palestinians, yay for Palestine. They just kill our president, or President wannabe. He was running for president. And he dies. And Kennedy, JFK, John F. Kennedy's son, let's give the Kennedy leg. And the other son, the other brother, I mean, Ted Kennedy, by Theodore or something, but Ted Kennedy. He, of course, drunk drives off a bridge and leaves his girlfriend trapped in the car, and she drowns. I mean, he just doesn't even try to get her out. And, the autopsy, to my knowledge, shows that she just flat out drowned. Not that she was hurt in the, going off the bridge. So he kills her, not intentionally, but stupidly, in that if you want to count drunk driving as intentional, meaning you got in the car drunk and you drove, and so was it murder? Well, some people would say so, because they would say all drunk driving deaths are murder. I had a good friend who believes that they should just be executed on the side of the road, because he had a relative who was killed. He wasn't in the car with a drunk driver, but a drunk driver hit the car that they were. I forget the relative's name, whether it was like a sister or an aunt or somebody, but somebody who was close to died by drunk driving. He just thought if you were overly visibly drunk, the police officers would just take your pistol out and shoot him immediately. Not that he's wrong, but do we really want to have the only downside is then police officers could just claim, I thought they were drunk, so I shot them. But if so I get the thing. So and hello, Mouse Hen. I'll get to the chat in a moment. Single or multi? Oh, this is just single player, if that's what you're asking, and a lot of talking. Continue and so he only makes it to senator, and then he basically stays senator more or less till the end of his life of a natural death, with a lot of other scandals around. And there's a few other deaths going on in the family, and yeah, including a few killed by other Kennedys that end up in mental institutions and things, because they're Kennedys. And then John F. Kennedy's son in a small airplane, along with his, I think, girlfriend and another, like, friend of the girlfriend's or something, I think, crashes in the sea in Massachusetts Bay Area there. So he dies. He was going to be president of the United States, if you don't realize. Could be the big globalist conspiracy went to get him, maybe, but it was really sort of weird because he was flying a rather modern airplane, but he crashed in the ocean at night, and it shouldn't have happened. So I don't know why it happened, and I don't know that I don't remember well enough there was any sense that he was drunk. So it was either pilot error or, mechanical flight error, and I'm not sure what they ultimately determined. But at night, he, crashed into the ocean, sort of mysteriously. And then RFK's son, the one that was killed by Sirhan, tries to become president, and the Democrats, and they reject him. So he's now Trump's HHS secretary. So the Kennedys have had a tragedy laced family. So yeah, only Ted Kennedy of Joseph Kennedy's sons dies more or less of a natural death. And if you look at President Kennedy's son, the little kid you see saluting his dad's coffin, is the one that was going to be president. If you look at him in his, what was it, early 30s, he was staying out of politics for then, but everyone was sure that once he got a little more mature, he could either straight up run for the presidency or more likely run for governorship of Massachusetts, be a governor for one term, and then probably win the presidency. Whether he would have been a good president or not, I don't know, but he had that personality that easily people would have voted for him. So I don't know if the machine killed him or if it was just purely an accident and the machine hated that he died. But yeah, so history does repeat. So we're seeing the changes. That just got me on drones and ended up in the Kennedys. Both human operated drones and AI drones. Now, I've the Lost Fleet series by Jack Campbell. I highly recommend it if you like science fiction with lots of space battles and things. Very much talks about the dangers of AI controlled war machines. Well, what he's talking about, and he's a former naval officer, are a certain level of thinking machine. Not just, oh, how do I hit that target thinking, but something of a semi-self-aware machine, or a machine that can remotely be hijacked. Well, he's right that we don't want to create Terminators. But looking at, and we should learn the lessons of, and I could definitely say a drone would include, in my opinion, like the Tomahawk cruise missile, because it's more than just a radar guided or an infrared guided air-to-air missile. That I don't quite consider a drone, because a Tomahawk, and they definitely improved them over the years, and I don't know what they are now. But what they were in the past, and this is before even GPS, you would launch them at a target, and they could fly along and look down as it flies along, look down at the ground and compare the ground that it's flying over to its sort of library of images to see if it's on track. And if it was off track, sort of identify, this building or sets of buildings that it would compare, in just its minimalistic mind. Oh, that's off to the west of where I'm supposed to be. Let's go a little more east, or something like that. So it would sort of know that it was both off track and to what direction. So it was thinking beyond just simply, I'm set on a heat source, let me follow that heat source. That I don't quite consider a thinking drone at all. But the Tomahawk cruise missile, would compare its environment to what its expected environment was, and make adjustments to it to follow its programming. So I would call that. So now we can see with Ukraine, we see the use of drones against the air, or that are more than just, because some of them are human used drones, more than just, heat source guided missiles or something. And we see drones used against the ground, both those, they're calling them suicide, but single use, I would call it, single use drones, as well as multiple uses, in that it flies over somewhere, drops like a mortar bomb, and flies home to get a new mortar bomb to do it again, or a reconnaissance flies around, sends back its data, and goes back home once it's done with its mission. As well as like seaborne drones, both surface and subsurface. Some of those are, and some of them are hybrids as far as I know, meaning they use both a human guided as well as a AI kind of element too being used. And so navies, armies, air units need to really understand the changes going on in Ukraine. And Ukraine, to me, and because we're looking at not that, we're looking at the Spanish Civil War, is today's equivalent of the Spanish Civil War. The Russo-Japanese War was not really a proxy war, but it was a limited war. Russia did send its high seas fleet to try to break out that limited war element, and got it basically completely sunk in the Straits of Tsushima by the Japanese. But Russia, now Japan probably mostly fully puts in a lot of its army. Russia does not, for two reasons. One, it still has potential threats. Prussia may attack, Austria may attack, Turkey may attack if all of its army, or the great bulk of its army, goes somewhere else. And two, just the physical limitations of supplying it over a not entirely finished railway system. I believe the railway system at the time, you had to come to Lake Baikal, and then you put stuff on small ships, very large boats or whatever, and go across Lake Baikal and pick up the railroad again, and then it went on. I believe so. So yeah, I'm not absolutely sure that was the necessary at that time. I know it was for a time period. So it was sort of a war. Now, considered one of the most warlike presidents in American history, was Teddy Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt. Well, he gets the Nobel Peace Prize for negotiating the end to the Russo-Japanese War. For some reason, and I don't understand why, other than just good propaganda and the idiocy of the American people. Mostly it's Democrats that start wars in America. So all of you out there in America and around the world all seem to love American presidents, but they're the ones that always seem to get going with the wars. You got Wilson in World War I. He was a Democrat, a rather left-wing Democrat. You got FDR in World War II. He gets that going. I'm not saying that there's always bad reasons to go into the wars, but it's the Democrats that do that. Gets that going. And he's also fairly left-wing. Truman, another Democrat, who's not very left-wing at all, gets America involved in Korea. The aforementioned John Kennedy, President Kennedy, gets us involved in Vietnam and gets hyper involved by his vice president, and then after he gets killed, follow-on president of Lyndon Baines Johnson, LBJ, in Vietnam. It's Republican Nixon that gets us out of that war. Yeah, it seems to be the Democrats that get us into wars. It also, Carter almost gets us into a war with Iran, with Desert One and that fiasco. And I would say it's Biden who, through apparent, whether real or not, but apparent weakness, gets the Ukraine war started, though America fortunately did not get involved in it. And it's always warlike presidents like Trump who end up signing more peace accords than anybody else. So that's hello, David Fletching. Yes, I know. Strong arm. Democrats. Yes. Let's check out how we got in here. Let's check out the chat. Go back up here. Okay, let's cruise through it quickly. Maybe we'll get through all that stuff. So that's that. Okay, plastic gangster to ellipsid. I don't. Were plenty of pointers in recent conflicts in the direction Ukraine, but it's still the mission reached 50,000 plus Ukrainians. How to operate NATO doctrine developed in the Cold War, mostly British. Simple fact is that George Clemenceau said, generals are always prepared to fight the last war, especially if they won it. And I'm doing very well, thank you, Plastic Gangster. Yes, that's Clemenceau's. Now that you mention it, I remember the thing. But another military maxim is don't change anything until you absolutely have to. So it's not even just fight the last war. It's don't change until you have to. Partially, and that does make a certain amount of sense, is what you're doing is based upon something that succeeds. Okay? That's why military, because things that don't succeed means you fail, so the military goes bye-bye, meaning it loses the war. So, yes. Potential railroad logistics being realized. Yes, it's very. Yes. Now, railroad logistics being important, that really shows up for the first time in the American Civil War. Yeah, that's the first railway war of any real scale. Let's see, Craig production. Let's see. There were thousands of volunteers from Western Allied nations. They were called the International Brigades. Yes. Oh, yes. There's definitely Spain is a proxy war. And I've gone into it in other both live streams as well as just made episodes talking a lot about this Spanish War. and we can see the potential, not saying it's going to happen, but the potential American Civil War. And for all of you, whether you're an American hater or just, hey, if America's weaker, we'll do better type people out there, remember the American Civil War. After that Civil War and all the death and all the destruction, America is much, much stronger after that war than before the war. It industrializes because of that war, more so than it had before. Okay, so if we do break out into some sort of civil war in America, sure, it will distract us for a little while, but whether, and I know they don't listen to me in Iran, but they should. Whether you're Iran or China or somebody who truly hates America, including left-wingers in Europe who truly hates America, or if you're just sort of whether average European citizen or average European politician who just power politics, shall we say, don't like the idea, and I understand it. Trust me, I understand it. Little Denmark compared to the power politics of Germany and France, whether it's military power or industrial power or just general economic power or populist power, little Denmark is living at the whims of its neighbors. If it gets cut off from trade or other things from some of the nations, it can be a crippling effect. Where somebody like France, if it stops trading with some of its neighbors, it can probably industrially over time fill up the gaps or trade with somebody else somewhere else on the planet effectively enough that it'll be okay. If it gets cut off from China trade or something, it'll be able to trade with Russia or America or whatever to get the widget or gadget or whatever it needs or a resource that it needs or whatever. So there's a power politics. So I get Europe would love to see America not quite as powerful it is without hating America. If we go into a civil war, could in theory be a collapse of America of some sort or another. Whether that means a rebirth of something after a while, but more than likely, if we again looking at history, it'll probably be unfortunately, a greater centralization of power, which is a bad thing because it's such a big country. We need more, power spread out through America, not just centralized in one location. But probably America that's just used military force on itself is probably more likely to use military force in other places in the world and whatnot. So you really don't want an American Civil War, but an American Civil War also doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be large militaries or large amounts of destruction. It can just be sort of, because we're definitely in civil strife here. We're definitely in the era of bleeding Kansas, leading up to the American Civil War. If you know your American history, in Minnesota right now, and possibly places like California and Washington State and whatnot, we could be heading more and more into a bleeding Kansas, and it may become a civil war. But right now, there's definitely an insurgency going on that America has, partially because the Democrats want the insurgency, denies that the insurgency exists. But don't think that it means, everything's going to collapse. And so the Democrats like the idea of people on their left wing creating violence that will then give them more centralized, more state control, reasons to ban things, control the internet, control guns, control whatever. Because that's the way to stop it, is to control these things. As opposed to address the issues that are upsetting people, is to control the objects, the physical objects that people can use, like the internet, like guns, like cars, like whatever. At some point, they'll want to pass a law that says you can only have auto-driving cars. So that way, people can't ram into government vehicles. because the car will only go where the computer says to go, and we'll make sure all the computers are programmed that won't allow it to run into other cars. And so they'll force people to have self-driving cars on the roads. They'll use that as an excuse. I probably just gave the government a new plan. Hello, Challenger boy. Well, I'll get to stuff. So, so you had a left-wing government that was using mostly covert as to who actually was doing it, violence against the old institutions. And it wasn't necessarily government institutions, because they were taking over control of the government institutions, like the left wing in America has been. But things like the church, which was established, centrally organized, huge, the Catholic Church, organized things, as well as the landowners and other things that they were using violence towards. And since they controlled both the government and the provoking violence, whenever there was a reaction to the violence, they could then come in and arrest the right-wingers who were, whether they were defending themselves in some cases or doing revenge attacks that pushed the right-wingers, whether they're conservative or not, because some of them are fascists. I wouldn't call fascists conservatives. But the right-wingers to react to it, including to the point of sort of the leading traditionalist general gets arrested one night. The police show up at his home, and he's dead on the side of the street the next morning. The police are claiming, oh, he tried to escape and we shot him. Are you telling me you're that pathetic that an unarmed general, because they searched him before he left, is riding in a police car with multiple policemen in it, tries to escape? Now, maybe he's trying to escape because he said, we just passed the police station you said we're going to, and we're heading out of town. And so you realize he's going to be, shot in some mysterious location or disappear to some, unknown prison, whichever one it was going to happen. And so this isn't a legitimate arrest where the lawyer can come in and, deal with things, but something bad was going to happen. So maybe he tried to escape. But your primary, your how to react to it is to shoot the guy? Or was that was the assassination, and that some policeman decided to assassinate, or higher ups decided to have some policeman assassinate this guy because he's somewhat protected in his home, but take him away and shoot them. That then provokes the army that's still around and to try a coup against the leftist government. That then fails, the coup fails, and then you have a civil war breakout, and you have, on the nationalist side, you have the Spanish who send, I think, up to, at a single time, was it 3.5 divisions worth of troops? Germany sends no troops. About 300 army guys that are repeatedly told by Berlin not to be anywhere near combat, although they are. But Berlin really doesn't want them there. And they're mostly, there's some, some anti-tank gun crews and some tank gun crews. But unlike here, where I have 2 divisions, it's about 300 guys at any one time. And they're supposed to just be trainers, training up and advising, sort of 1 or 2 guys near the front lines to see how the Spaniards are using the tanks, the Panzer ones that are sent, and trying to observe and learn. So it's more advisors being sent. And then, of course, German Luftwaffe units that are actually manned by German pilots and are flying German airplanes with different markings on it. Like I say, lots of, about 3.5 divisions or so of Spanish troops, and lots of Spanish Air Army, Italian air power there too. The Soviet Union sends little or no ground troops, but lots of secret secret police type units, NKVD or Cheka or whoever type guys. Lots of those Russians are running around, and hundreds, if not thousands, of those guys are running around. Huge amounts of weapons are being sent as well. And then, as mentioned, the international brigades are showing up on the Republican side. So it's a proxy war of leftist factions versus rightist factions in Spain. We're seeing some of that, definitely, because of the modern nature of warfare. And there are advisors in Ukraine, Western advisors in Ukraine, some formerly active, some currently active types. There's definitely some. I'm not saying there's lots. I don't know who, what, but there's enough evidence that they're there. But a lot of it is having Ukrainians leave Ukraine, go to someplace, and openly say be trained in Britain or in Germany or Poland or whatever, and then sent back to the war. And this is sort of the borders here now. But right around here, I believe, they set up a factory, not to make weapons, but to, and I think it's mostly for Rheinmetall type weapons. The Panzerhaubitze 2000 and the Leopard 2 tanks is a repair facility inside of Romania, that when a weapon system is damaged or just, is falling apart from heavy use, it gets sent back just inside Romania, gets rebuilt, and sent back to the Romanian or to the Ukrainians. So, yeah, it's sort of a NATO versus Russia, because there is good evidence of, and proxies, there's good evidence of what was the... Oh, I forget the Muslim groups that had back in the 90s fought the Russians are now fighting for the Russians there, and then has been identified North Korean troops fighting in Ukraine. So we're definitely seeing proxy forces other than Russians fighting here. So I would say this is enough to say that history repeats itself. So there will be other major wars, unfortunately, and there's a lot of lessons to be learned in the Ukraine war. I hope good nations are paying attention to those, because unfortunately, it's sometimes the losers are the ones, because they lost, realize that changes need to be made. So they look at the lessons of the war. And so all of you people, and I know I just have some really cool and nice guys here, like, Strongarm, who is a good friend, and Arno and Eric, who are all good friends of mine. Just a few people listen to me. Not that you all agree with me, but that listen to me and my lessons from history. I've had people in chats, whether here or over on Slithering TV, which I do stream. I know people like Plastic Gangster and Jamnuska and whatever all listen to me over there as well. Somebody said, well, isn't Russia pretty much done? They're like no longer a threat. Yeah, they're right now, less done, less cooked than Germany was in 1918 or 1919. Yeah, it's November. I'm lousy at dates, but some dates I can remember. The armistice takes effect on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918. 1918. So basically 1919, just a few weeks short, 9 weeks short or something of that. In 1919. Oh, what? Oh, approximately, it's a little bit more. So it's almost 21 years later. 1939 is around, September 1939, and Germany takes Poland, takes France, almost takes Britain, takes Belgium, Netherlands, Denmark, Norway. Yeah. Russia is about as done or as less done than Germany in 1918. So if you think, and so yeah, Poland probably, who has the largest, I believe, army in Europe, though not the best, shouldn't have the best because they don't have the largest populace. They don't have the largest industrial capacity. And that matters because even if you have a tank factory, and even if you can pay for a bunch of tanks, which they're doing both, they're either have built or getting built a factory from South Korea to build the South Korean tanks and then buying other models of tanks too. But Italy, also another lesson from history. And I started to talk about, I think the book's called Iron Arm. It's on the development of the Italian armored forces. One of the major limitations to the the Italian armored development isn't, though it is partially, but isn't production capability, technology. They can't weld, just as an aside, they can't weld like Germany. Germany has some of the most advanced welding in the world at the time, being able to weld two thick pieces of metal together effectively. Most of the other nations would just do a weld seam at the two edges, where the Germans could weld all the way through a multiple inch thick piece of metal, so it's all welded together instead of just at the edges, if you know what I'm saying. So Italy's riveting its armor together. And it's not necessarily that Italy doesn't know the technology, but Italy doesn't have the technology widespread. Italy doesn't have the technology in the sense that there's a lot of people who know how to do this. It's one thing to have one prototype shop somewhere that acquires, a German welding machines or whatever, and had somebody who goes up to Germany and learns the welding technique. Yeah, okay, but you need thousands of those machines, thousands of those people who know how to do the welds to make the, welded armor of the Panzers. And this is why some of the Shermans are cast hulls, cast turrets. I think they're basically always cast turrets. But where the Germans are mostly welding turrets, it's because the amount of welding ability that you have. America can cast better than it can weld. It gets better at welding things. But it starts, it's a lot of it. And if you look at like the early tank, the Lee Grant, I say Lee Grant because there's the Lee and then the later British Grant, that were both being made simultaneously, one for American use and the other for British use. So the Lee Grant tank, or tank versions, those are mostly, there is an experimental at the very end to make a welded hull version, but basically by that time, let's just make Shermans. Let's not worry about this. That they're, wanting to rivet the tank hull together. And some of the Shermans are, so much cast, and they use big bolts to hold hull elements together, partially so they can take them apart. That's why they're not riveted. They're bolted together. So like the front lower glacis element is a single big piece of cast metal that is bolted on, so that in the field, whether that means at the front lines or just back behind the front lines, but in theater, being able to take that tank back that is damaged, you can pull off the the cast bit that's bolted on that may have a hole in it, pull that off, and have a replacement waiting there, and have a replacement waiting, transmission, front drive wheel transmission that got damaged. The crew may be just fine. They just, immobilize the tank with a hit there and replace that and get at that, or just to do maintenance on that they can, you need a crane to lift this piece of metal. But, so it's, and they are doing some welding, and there are all welded hulls of the Shermans as well. But with, rolled steel and just a few pieces that are cast that are put on it. But part of the reason they keep doing the cast hulls is just the amount of welding facilities that are available at the time. Now it's being expanded as the war is going on, but they need to weld other things than just tanks. They can weld ships and other stuff. So there's a lot of need for that in technology. So it wasn't just, technical capabilities or production capabilities, meaning, how much steel that they can make per year kind of abilities. But it was also the infrastructure of Italy itself. Italy is not a very motorized nation. Yeah, they have delivery trucks in cities to some degree, but if you've ever been to an Italian city, there's lots of areas of Florence. I believe Frienza is Florence in English. That you can't drive a truck down. That it's so small that you gotta, and it's like one way only, and you can barely drive a car down a lot of these roads. So you really can't get places with lots of trucks, or get to lots of places with trucks, full-size trucks. I'm not even talking big, like 18-wheeler trucks. I'm just talking a truck. And Italy, before the war is just limited on motorcycles and motor scooters. I mean, they exist, and but they're limited on it. Germany has a lot more motorcycles per capita, at least, than Italy does. Italy has a sports car, or sort of an elite car element that's mostly, sporty, if you will, going on. But that's just a tiny fragment of the population. So they're getting around cities on buses and or like electrified, sometimes electrified buses, or electrified, light rail coming around, whatever you want to call it. And they're not motorized. So they don't even have a gasoline infrastructure, meaning if you want to move a motorized division from Ferrara to Ancona down here by driving, you got to bring all the gas with you. You got to bring the gas for along the drive as you refuel the tanks and the trucks that are, hauling supplies. Infantry's riding the back of some of the trucks. Other trucks are towing artillery pieces. You've got to resupply that unit as it moves along from trucks that are moving along that need gas themselves, moving along this path. And then once it gets here, you've got to have gas here ready to go. Now, maybe from wherever the refinery is, you can move the gas on the railway to create a supply dump here. But it's got to do this here. We're in a country like Germany, who doesn't have a lot of cars per capita. They're trying to get cars per capita and increase those for sure, but has a lot more motorcycles per capita and a lot of like delivery trucks, whether going between cities. Sure, they're using absolutely a lot of railway, but there are delivery trucks that are, going around too, as well as lots of delivery trucks in and around a particular city, to get from a railway head to different parts of a metropolis like Nuremberg. So they've got lots of gas stations and lots of, whether it's using rail, which I'm sure they did, or using trucks to, tanker trucks to drive to a gas station and, refill up the tanks at the gas station and then drive back to wherever they're loading that up from, whether it's from a different city or just, centralized facility. So they have an infrastructure for motorization, right? Italy doesn't. And so this is the problem that like the Soviet Union faces, the places, like Yugoslavia and Romania, and even France faces, that limit their, and what they don't see the need for motorization, to learn the lessons. There's at least one case in which during the 1940 campaign, during Fall Gelb and or the immediate after Fall Gelb, sort of gets them to the coast, and then what is it, Fall Rot or whatever, that then goes down and takes Paris. Somewhere during that campaign, and I think it's fairly early in it, they decide to move a motorized unit. This is before they had, I think before or at the time de Gaulle is forming up his first armored division. Because they're only forming up the first armored division during the Fall Gelb attack, Francis. So they're going to move an armored unit. Well, I'm trying to remember some of the details because it's been years since I read the story. They're going to move it via train. And they're going to move it, let's just say, to Reims here. They're going to move it via train. But as it's going to Reims, and this is like a company or something, this is, or a battalion at most, they've scheduled to have other trains deliver fuel to Reims. It's just someplace, but but the railway tracks are damaged, the ones that the armored unit is on. So they can't get the train with the armor unit there. And they have so little fuel in the tanks, because they just sort of put in enough fuel in the tanks of the tanks of the tank, that they can't drive the tanks anywhere. So they eventually have to get, because they have enough fuel for some motorcycles, and they have, like some liaison or whatever motorcycles, So they send off someone's driving off with a motorcycle to go find the train with the fuel on it that's supposed to create the fuel dump, to get that train to load if it had been unloaded, to get the fuel loaded back up, and go get the train as close as they can to where the other train is stuck, so that they can then fuel up the tanks to drive the tanks to where they need to go. Because they don't have infrastructure in that, we'll just show up at a gas station somewhere and drain it up, but just, the one-time emergency use, if you will, to move this company of tanks somewhere close enough to its supply lines. They're not coordinated enough to know that, we need to put trucks with fuel tanks, on the same train that you have the tanks. So even if you're going to do, if you need more cars, train cars to be able to tow in one train, use two trains and have half the tanks and half the fuel trucks on one train, and have the other half of tanks and the other half of fuel on the other train. So at least wherever some tanks are, they have fuel to drive somewhere. They haven't learned these lessons from watching Spain enough to know about how to operate like this. And so they just don't know these things. And Germany, from the beginning of the war, has Wunderwaffe, wonder weapons, though they're not always recognized. And Eric has helped me and sent me some. I found a few here and I'm going to make some videos, and there's already videos out there, and they're probably going to be better than what I'm going to make, but you can cover the same topic multiple times. One of their Wunderwaffe is the jerry can, which the Americans only sort of kind of copy, and copy it badly. The British eventually copy it almost exactly, eventually. I'm not going to go into all the wonders of the jerry can. But what the Germans did, they did have fuel trucks, with a big fuel tank on them, and one or more hoses, probably 2 hoses, to fill up 2 vehicles at once. They did have those, most assuredly. But you know what they mostly had? Was trucks. Just a truck, like an Opel truck. The Opel Blitz. They could do just about anything, truck-like. Carry troops, carry ammunition, or carry jerry cans. And they like jerry cans because for a short distance, one person can pick up 2 jerry cans. But it was probably easier, and mostly it would be 2 people picking up a jerry can. So I won't go into all the details of it, but it had 3 handles on it. One in the center for one person to pick up. Mostly for that was for possibly if it was empty, or just one holding it, or easily 2 people, the sort of 2 outer handles, is so that each person could pick up one handle and move it with 5 gallons, or roughly 5 gallons of gasoline in it. And so what they would do is that, and they had this all planned out before the campaign even started, is, they have a supply dump of fuel here. And then they knew their motorized forces, which could, the primary means through the whole war, the primary mode of transportation, well, is really 2 things. One, rails. Mentioning, rails to get to places. But 2, beyond the rails, is horse. Okay? Germany doesn't have lots of cavalry units, has some, but what they have is wagons or carts being pulled by horses. That's their primary. Their overwhelming amount of use. But even a horse-drawn infantry division has some vehicles and some trucks. Some artillery pieces, some anti-tank guns will be drawn by trucks, pulled by trucks. Others will be pulled by horses. But for the needing of the fuel, they know this. So what they do is, obviously the fuel going along with the unit, but they know they're going to run out of fuel. Because even if you're not going this way, even if you're here, when you're fighting, you're doing all this. Tanks are moving around here, driving around. Artillery's repositioning. Oh shit, there's so many tanks. We need to get some anti-tank guns somewhere fast. So the trucks drive them. So when a division is sitting here, it isn't not using fuel. It's and fighting. As opposed to just hanging out. It's doing all this. Okay, it's burning fuel. If nothing else, it's bringing recently cooked bread from the cook stoves up to the troops at the front, driving back and forth. So, but they also know that they're going to be driving this way too. So the Germans have a whole thing set up. They have a supply dump. Fuel is brought in either with large fuel trucks that are not really suitable for near front operations, or brought in via tanks on trains, or on trucks with the sort of 50-gallon, I'll call them oil drums, but you can put fuel in them, big things like this, like that, are brought up to a dump, a fuel dump, and then from there transferred into the 5-gallon jerry cans. In the tens of thousands of jerry cans, whole fields of them. And so then a truck will be loaded with jerry cans, and that truck will drive up along the path of the advance, get up near somewhere to the front. Somebody, whoever it is, decides where they're going to stop and offload their fuel. Could be next to a panzer unit, or could be just next to a location that they'll then let panzers know, hey, you need fuel? Come over here and get it. And somewhere, and they'll drop off it'll be just like a driver and a co-driver. kind of thing, will show up. And then the local troops, whoever they are, will swarm that truck and haul all those jerry cans off the truck. And these are important elements of World War II. And then that truck will turn around and drive back the way it came and get back to here, say, and see a big pile of empty jerry cans. And then the two guys, maybe with the help of some troops that are nearby, will load all those jerry cans onto that truck and drive that truck back to the fuel depot. And then the guys locally here will swarm the truck, pull off all the empty jerry cans, load it up with filled jerry cans, and that truck will drive back up, and instead of stopping here, presumably drive up to here to the new front line position, offload its fuel, and then drive back. Now, maybe once they secure enough of the path forward, they'll establish another big fuel dump, and with the known that the railway is connected, the bridges all work and all that stuff, and they'll create another big fuel dump, and then another big fuel dump, and then another. So they've got this whole thing planned out for Fall Gelb. And now the invasion of Poland is partially spur of the moment. So it's a lot of, there's ad hoc units, local reserve units, one SA unit that's made up of Sudeten SA, because they're highly trained and actually as a unit trained to use modern weapons, light machine guns and rifles, because they had been planned to be the sort of the insurgents for Czechoslovakia, but that doesn't work out. So they're well trained as a unit, because a lot of the SA people know how to shoot rifles, but they haven't had coordinated company level how to fight as a unit in that way. So a lot of the SA men are being drafted in the army and are trained up in that. But there's at least one armed up SA unit of sort of brigade strength that fights, and there's other sort of various scrambled units that are cobbled together that fight. So the invasion of Poland is sort of an ad hoc kind of invasion. I don't know how well they had planned out that whole fuel scheme, but that's in September 39. Now by May, June 40, they have this whole plan for fueling the motorized elements of the advance, including obviously the big Panzer thrust. But all the motorized advance, large or small, has this whole fuel scheme advance. And this is all planned out. And this is what I talk about, lessons from history, not just historical lessons that I'm sure that I'm getting details wrong. If you really want to know, and sometimes I will prepare a notated, make all the notes out and tell you a specific historical lesson. But these are lessons from history. So Germany, because it loses World War I, sort of like quoting the Clemenceau quote, France learns to fight World War I, but just better. Germany, because they realize it doesn't work in World War I, they come up with what they did. And in some ways, they were fighting World War I the best. You have to remember that. They were fighting World War I better than France was, that's for sure. They were the ones that used heavily amounts of concrete, building concrete bunkers. I think part of it was the Allies kept thinking they were going to just, the next time we're going to have a major breakthrough. So why build concrete defensive bunkers? Because we're going to go on the offensive and throw the Germans back. So no point in building concrete permanent sort of bunkers as they would see it, because that just means permanent front lines. Where the Germans were going, well, we want to go on the offensive too. They eventually have the Ludendorff offensive. But in the meantime, let's build the best bunkers we can. So Germany fights World War I the best, maybe. It's only the American industry, tanks are showing up in large numbers and that kind of thing, as well as German economy and food situation is collapsing. So they both end up losing on the battlefield with sort of proto-World War II elements. And Germany realizes, oh shit, these tanks and other things means warfare has changed. And the confirmations and lessons, I am sure, I don't have, and that's why I say I'm not saying I know, but I am sure that some of that fuel element is learned in the Spanish, observing the Spanish Civil War, that you need to maintain your flow of your offensive. You need to have that stuff prepared, able to move. How to do this whole flowing of fuel is, if not the lesson, how to do it is learned in the Spanish Civil War, but the need for it, I'm sure, is learned in the Spanish Civil War. And that then gets worked on and set up for what happens for Germany. And America, to some degree, and Britain to some degree, end up copying the German style of fuel support. So, yeah, lessons from history. Russia's exhausting itself, people. Russia, because we can see stupider things in the world, okay? I don't know what Russian military is deployed along modern-day Finnish front here. I call it a front because it's not actually a war, I know, but it's a potential war. Are there units here now? Or if Finland and Sweden and any other NATO forces, would they just roll into St. Petersburg unopposed? Oh, sure, I'm sure there's local police and other people that might pull out some guns and shoot. But are there military units up here? I don't know. And I don't know that anybody's publishing well-informed current information on that. So I don't know what Russia has sitting around here. If Russia has more, you remember, we can see Japan, I can't win the war in China. I'm losing the war in China. Well, let's start a new war with the Americans and the British. Losing one war, let's create a different war. I don't know if Russia is stupid enough that if they think they have a stalemate here, if they somehow think that, well, we'll attack here and then they'll decide to negotiate a surrender or a peace treaty, because they'll lose it. We'll take Estonia and take Latvia and threaten Poland and Lithuania, and that'll make them, come to the negotiating table and, give up big chunks of Ukraine, and we'll withdraw from, whether they will do some sort of mindset craziness like that happen, that if there's forces around here, that in theory could happen, but I don't think even those forces, could make it to modern day Berlin. Right. So they might widen the war stupidly, but probably not. But Germany can't. France can't. Britain can't. Not won't. Can't. Right now, seriously upgrade their army. Seriously upgrade their navy. They don't have the industry set up to do so. Oh yeah, they have a Leopard 2 factory. I'm not saying they don't. They have a Eurofighter factory spread around or whatever the hell. But they can't respond to a big threat. And there are still politicians in power, not just somebody wanting to run for office, not just, there's a few people in the backbenches of the German parliament that says, peace now, peace forever. We want to give up all arms and we're going to give all of our police non-lethal weapons. We don't care if there's a Russia with nuclear weapons and everything in between. We're only going to ever have non-lethal stuff. Yay! And now whether those people are fucking idiots enough to think that if there's a militarized Russia out there, won't do something about that, or if there are actually people that are either Germans that are so anti-German that want to see Germany destroyed, or they're actual plants or agents of Russia. Anybody in Europe, anybody of any authority in Europe. I'm not just talking somebody, hi, I'm going to go live in the mountains somewhere, or I'm going to go live on some little island in Denmark or something and just forget about the world. Okay, those people are, they're blackpilling, they're checking out. I know a few people like that in America. They just want to get away from it all, literally. They'd like to live beyond roads, just sort of, go off and live on their own and just forget about the rest of the world. Okay, yeah, there's individuals like that, whatever. And there's a few individuals, doesn't matter, because, some of them, I don't know all the story, but things have happened to them and they've checked out. So at least one of them I know was very much part of the aerospace industry. I don't know quite exactly what he did, but he hates it. So I don't know what he knows. I don't know what happened to him, but he's checked out and he lives on a mountain near where I live. Up on a mountain, up a dirt road. I don't know where he lives because he won't tell me. He told me what county he lives in, and he lives on a mountain. And he's described the dirt road that people drive on and get stuck all the time on. That's all I know. I have a cell phone number for him, and he comes down to town once in a while, so I see him once in a while, but haven't seen him in months. But that was more me back when I was sick. But yeah, so I know people that have checked out that aren't just people that grew up somewhere checked out and just don't know. No, he was involved in the aerospace industry and whatnot, so I don't know. Don't know what he knows. Don't know what happened, but he's checked out. But anybody who tries to maintain a position of power right now who is not for remilitarizing is your enemy, people. Because either they are so stupid that they think, oh, well, because we have an army, then that army will just want to go to war because it exists. If you're that stupid, look at Switzerland as an extreme example, or you have Sweden. It's had an army since 1900 and hasn't gone to war really. I mean, we can talk about their stupid involvement in self-hatred and going down and destroying Western civilization in Africa, attempts at that. But so they've had an army and didn't get involved in World War I or World War II or, like I say, only UN wars in Africa crap. But, things approved by the Soviet Union, yes. Anybody in power who is not actively wanting to rearm is your enemy. He is your enemy because, and I say this whoever I'm speaking to, because he or she wants to have a situation in which others, not you, determine your future fates. Whether it's Russia, America, Sweden, or whoever, if they're armed and you don't have arms, you in the long run you aren't going to survive as a self-governing body. You aren't going to govern yourself. Somebody else will be governing you. And so that's why they are things. Okay, let's continue. Building drone warfare, yes. That's why the USA is training with shotguns. Okay, shotguns, drones. Shotguns are more effective than nothing. But there's a lot of drones that can be outside of shotgun ranges. The range a shotgun can hit. Because I could put a drone up high enough that any shotgun will not be able to hit it. And it could either drop mortar bombs on you or just sit up there and watch you and will give me your coordinates. And then I can shoot mortar rounds at you, So, hey, not only do we see them in that large group of woods, I can spot individual positions. So with that, I can get literally GPS coordinates and shoot something that, and I can get a computer that will tell my mortar exactly what angle to aim at, both azimuth and elevation, to shoot and hit you. So, shotguns are helpful. Shotguns temporarily fill a gap. But you need something better than that. What you need is Definitely something you could put on a standard vehicle, pickup truck, larger military truck, armored personnel carrier, tank, that will have a mini sensor platform. Could be radar, could be LiDAR, could be just general vision, could be heat seeking, could be all of those, could be any one of those, that sits up there, and then have some sort of like a mini gun, but some sort of machine gun on it that sits up there, and then could even be something like a 9mm, which I can get greater range out of, but 223 would be okay, 308 would be okay. Would sit up there, but you want it fairly light ammo. You can do these in 50 caliber and 20mm too, but you need something small like that will sit up there and be turned on. And as soon as it sees, whether like an incoming mortar round, possibly, or as soon as it sees a drone, it'll shoot it. Now you can turn it off. You can even have it, if you want to design it, to have somebody sitting there looking at the screen, to have hit the approve button before it shoots, or you can have, friend or foe kind of info so it doesn't shoot down friendly drones. But you need something like that. And of course, if you get small enough to mount on a truck, maybe backpack portable one, like that might be like a 9mm kind of, or maybe better yet, the 5.7 round, 5.7mm round that the P90 uses. Because you want a sort of high volume, high velocity, because they can't be too armored if they're flying around. They can be a little armored, but not too armored. Whether it's something small enough to go in a backpack, or something that you can put, some, just 2 bicycle type wheels on it, cart that you pull, and also have, a few extra handles to be able to lift it up over a wall or carry it through a swampy bit or whatever, so man portable, so to haul the thing around, mostly on wheels, but get over something, have it, whether it's 2 men or 8 men, to be able to pick up and carry for a ways, even a few miles. 8 men carrying something for a few miles, that's very doable. Spread the weight out, and then set up on a tripod to operate in positions. That is what's needed. So I've just described a weapon system that I don't know if nations are really looking at, but something like that can be mounted on, small enough to mount on current tanks, can be sort of awkwardly mounted, designed into future tanks and future APCs, be able to put it on trucks and whatever to move it around. And the reason you want it on trucks is wherever that fuel dump is, wherever that whatever is, you can also have an anti-drone immediate system as well as other stuff. So you need something more than just a shotgun. But shotguns are a stopgap. Drones with grenades, flamethrower, robot dogs, absolutely. I mean, that isn't just a joke. I mean, you may have meant that, Strong Arm David Fletching, as a joke. You can have, I don't know how much we want to trust an AI, especially to randomly kill or randomly identify and kill targets. Okay. One way to deal with that would be something like a drone that has an AI that can move around, but it cannot physically access the weapon system on the drone, whether it's flying or robot walking dog or whatever. It can't, it knows it has a weapon, maybe it doesn't even know that. It knows it's supposed to go around and identify and look at targets. And then, whether it's a wire guided, so there's actually some pictures of some fields with look to be hundreds of thin wires on them in Ukraine, because they're flying so many wire guided drones that, leave the wire behind once it's either shot down or whatever. Or it goes into its target, because there are wire guided anti-tank missiles that do the same thing. Whether it's wire guided or whether it's radio or both, however it gets, that there's a human operator that may be able to move a camera, but may also be able to see the camera that the AI is looking through. And then the human operator hits the fire button. Or you can have a drone that, again, you're sort of flying, that has an AI that if it detects it loses contact with its operator, could be through jamming, could be just because it goes the other side of a hill or mountain, it flies home. If it goes back to its start point. So you can have AIs that don't really have too much control over what they do, with the weapon. So I don't know that I want an AI dog to be the judgment of who's the enemy and who's not the enemy on a front line, because is it really going to be able to recognize facial patterns? Is it really going to uniform patterns? And if the enemy's put on the uniform, and that confuses humans too, obviously. But how much do we want? Now it can have a program that, whether wire guided or wireless radio, that if it loses contact, it comes home. And it may also have a program in it that it just follows it like a lot of flying vehicles do. It has it knows it gets told to go somewhere, but the actual AI itself is doing the walking motion, dealing with the uneven ground, or it detects what might be an obstacle that it wants to jump over, whether over a wall or over some water. But doesn't need the skill of the human operator to perform the jump motion. It just knows how to do it. So you may be able to do decent hybrid things. But the reason you want the flamethrower is that if you're dealing with bunkers like we see in World War I, particularly in the Pacific campaign, where the Japanese would have bunkers that you would be able to eventually get up right next to, and they'd be deep enough in there that you just want to stick the flamethrower in and turn it on to get in there. And part of what they're doing is, yes, part of they're trying to burn the people, but also what that will do is suck all the oxygen out, and they'll die of asphyxiation. So even if, because of twists and turns in the back part of the cavern and or distance that the flamethrower can't get into, they'll suck all that oxygen in it and out, and eventually just die of asphyxiation. So yeah, flamethrower walking dogs, not a bad idea. Better idea would be a flamethrower and at least like a pistol caliber, so if something either you don't want to quite catch on fire or is outside of the range of whatever its flamethrower is and it wants to be able to shoot at it, that's not a bad idea. Modern production of tanks and airplanes being under 10 years and stockpiles back to Cold War basically exhausted. Absolutely. This is what I'm talking about. Yeah, they're probably, Rheinmetall or whoever's building the Leopard 2 are probably cranking them out right now. But how many do they produce a month, let alone a day? And if you ever get involved in the war, and we can see what's happening in Ukraine, you need to have replacement vehicles being in real production. Not just, in 6 months we'll get 30 tanks made. Yeah, that'll be enough. No. And so anybody, the most expensive tank in the world is made in Japan. You know why it's the most expensive tank in the world? Not because it's so technically advanced, not that it isn't. It's not that it's using something, it's encrusted in diamonds or some just expensive materials. Not that it's inflation or the Japanese yen or anything like that. No. It's because Japan has enough tanks for its army. Okay, has enough. But Japan learned the lesson that it needs tank production. It cannot, because maybe he's a great guy, but a Ron Paul type president in America who believes in a strong American defense, but no American armed forces will leave the boundaries of America. So we'll defend America to the death, and we'll have a super army, but it won't leave America. And we'll have a super navy, but it'll just sit off our coasts and protect it. And we'll protect America, and we won't go anywhere else in the world. Now, of course, the next president may change the policy, but during that policy, and we will not get involved in wars like World War I and World War II by sending arms to a belligerent nation, because the enemies of that nation may decide to attack us instead. So Japan realizes that it's not necessarily a bad America or somebody else, that they do not want to be reliant upon foreign production for their weapons. They've learned that lesson. To not be reliant upon foreign production for their weapons. And they've got, like I say, enough tanks. So they keep the factory open. They keep the factory workers employed. And they produce like 10 tanks a year. Now they may be able to, let's say, produce 100 tanks a year or 200 tanks a year. But they have all this factory just sitting, and they just produce 10 tanks. Slowly. All these factory workers just have a make work job, because if we ever need to, we have the factory, we have the trained workers, not have to retrain somebody. Now, maybe to really produce a lot of tanks, you'll need to retrain more workers and get that factory running 24/7, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the cost of maintaining that factory balloons. I think it's, I mean, years like 6 times the price of making an American Abrams tank, the Japanese tank costs, because they're just keeping that factory open. Oh, and they also have a basic policy of not exporting their arms. Because they don't want to get involved in foreign wars, even as just as an arms production. So they'll sell like microchips or something, or probably steel or whatever else that might get turned, even knowingly get turned into a weapon system. But they don't want to export weapon systems, whether it's rifles or anti-aircraft missiles or ships, for export, not just to combatants, but to even nations at peace. They don't want to export arms, and they want to keep an arms industry. So they have very expensive arms to keep it in production, even when they don't need it. Now, it may not be enough if they were going to, go with another land war with China, because they decide to defend, be allies this time instead of conquerors of Korea and Taiwan and the Philippines. And they need to, whether it's a ground war in Taiwan or a ground war on the wherever, and not like to conquer all of China, but to, be a alternative front, or defend, go up and defend South Korea from North Korea, as well as Chinese reinforcements there, that they may need to do this, and they're going to need a tank factory. And Korea's tank factory, well, that may be just fine, or that tank factory may get destroyed. Now, of course, their factory may get destroyed too, but at least they had one. So they do this. They know that lesson. So anybody who does not want to put serious resources, which includes money, but serious resources in rearming in Europe, is your enemy, or anywhere else in the world. Just because you're armed up, the pacifists should not be in power. Sorry, they should not be in power. So they need to do it. So Russia's immediate a threat, like I just did the scenario that they may do Japan of World War II. They may decide some stupidly to whether try to do, use their submarines to sink NATO, whether warships or NATO, or just, ships going to NATO ports just to do a naval blockade, or whether they stupidly want to create a new front in the war to try to get Europe to negotiate to stop, supporting Ukraine, or whatever it might stupidly be. I don't know if they're capable of that. But no, they're probably not going to be showing up in Berlin. Okay, it's just a very probably not. But 21 years later, Germany is the beast that basically conquers most of Europe. If they had knocked out, if Halifax had become prime minister and not Churchill, I think there would have been a moment, whether it was Japan entering the war, but that brings in the Americans. So even before the Americans in, there may have been a moment that Halifax would have been willing to negotiate with Germany. If the U-boat losses the way they were, Halifax very well might have blinked and negotiated a armistice, or whatever you want to call it, whether it's in a full-out peace or just an armistice with Germany, that then keeps America out of the war. And then a war with the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union without American support. What was it, 100,000 trucks last week or the other week? It was America sent, someone posted, I knew it was thousands, but it's like 100,000 trucks or something America sends to Russia during World War II. That's just trucks. Look, guys, if it's really just a Germany versus Soviet matchup, I'm going to bet. I'm not saying it's going to be an easy win, no, but I'm going to bet on Germany winning. If Germany doesn't have to seriously worry about its other fronts, if Germany isn't being bombed by somebody else, if the Soviet Union is not getting massive amounts of aid, Soviet Union also gets, I don't know how much railway cars they get. Maybe they get components, but they also get delivered railway engines made in America, to keep their railways running. So without the ability to run all those trucks around, a lot of those offensives the Soviets did make, like the post Citadel offensive or whatever it is, they're in a world of hurt. So, and Germany obviously dominates most of Europe at that point, at the time of going into there. So Germany in 21 years is almost the world superpower, or one of the great powers conquering Europe. It may not be a superpower in that, when does it actually get nukes, and does it have a navy to dominate the world like the U.S. does with both nukes and a big navy, but it's at least the great power of Europe in 21 years. Yep, Russia's corrupt, but there's enough people have decided to jump out of their high-story windows that maybe the new people that come into the positions learn not to be very corrupt. I'm not saying they don't get a free lunch now and again, and I'm not saying they don't get slipped some cash from some arms maker or something to do something, but they'll know, I think now, because if you don't know, one of the stories is there was a DEI woman, I'm just going to say it that way, who was in charge of the supply or procurement or whatever, I think procurement or whatever, for whatever this region, greater region of the Russian army. It's inherited from the Soviet army, but the Russian army, this sort of area, who shortly after the outbreak, within like the first year of the outbreak of the Ukraine war, ends up deciding that she needs to jump out of a high office window. Because she had been so corrupt for so long, and reporting, oh yeah, we've got 1,000 working tanks, and we've got 5,000 people who are working on them. Whatever. I'm obviously just speculating here. And they've been buying all these spare parts for these tanks, and they've been paying all these 5,000 workers to work on these 1,000 tanks, when in fact there's only 500 workers. And they only have 200 working tanks because the rest don't have spare parts. And she and other people, I'm sure, not just her, but she's sort of running this corruption campaign that they're pocketing the budget money for keeping these things running or procuring them. We bought 20 when they bought 2 of whatever it is. So I think probably the corruption level is going to go down. Now, I'm not saying it's going to go away, but it's going to go down. Because there's corruption in the American, whether it's from, and when I say corruption, it may not be illegal, but how many procurement officers in the Army or Navy or Air Force, how many politicians, how many bureaucrats that are involved in procurement and buying things for them, whether it's office supplies or surface-to-air missiles that then leave the government service from whatever jobs they were doing and go to work in the defense industry as a technical advisor, as a lobbyist, as a whatever it is. So they may not be accepting any bribe money. They may not technically be doing anything illegal, anything at all. And who knows, maybe they're just covering up for supplying our Stargate program for off-world military forces that we have to, $10,000 toilet seats, okay, they'll fall for that one. Oh, $500,000 wrenches, yeah, just hiding all of our building of spaceships that we're operating out in somewhere on other stars. Maybe that's what's going on. Maybe, but there is a certain level of corruption in the American. Again, I'm not accusing anyone of breaking the law here. I'm just saying that it's corrupt. Corrupt doesn't always. It can be that your younger brother is very, very familiar with the law. He's very bureaucratic. He's going to run the Attorney General's office wonderfully. So you hire your brother. I'm not saying that there aren't better people out there, but you don't know who's actually going to be better at running that job until they run that job, just because they were an attorney general of another state or something like that. They may flub it. They may do okay in their job at the state, but they may flub it at the federal government. You don't know how people are going to work out. But if you hire a loyalist attorney general, are they any good at it? Are they even what would be a standardly good at it? No, you're hiring somebody loyal. This is what the problem Trump had in his first administration. He rewarded a senator who wanted to be an attorney general, and then that attorney general just basically recused himself with anything doing with Trump. He sort of checked out of being attorney general, let the assistant attorney general, which was a bureaucrat who hated Trump, a career bureaucrat, run it. And Trump learned that lesson, and that's why he picked Pam Bondi, who has some issues and problems, and why no one's been arrested over the Epstein files, and she was trying to cover that up. I think she was telling Trump bullshit about it. And I think other people in the orbit were telling Trump bullshit. So when that first release happened, Trump thought it was everything, or everything important, or whatever. Yes, the buck ultimately stops at the president, but we can look again, history repeating itself. Sometimes Louis XIV or Louis XVI gets told things by advisors that aren't true. And in those days, they didn't necessarily have good reporting of information. And so who's telling the president what can manipulate the president. So it might be Trump was trying to cover things up for buddies and knowing that there were really bad stuff there, or Trump just, because again, if you don't know, at some point, Trump gets a complaint from a woman about what Epstein was doing, and Trump bans Epstein from all Trump properties, Mar-a-Lago, which is both a residence, but also a big facility for, if you want to hold a big wedding or come there for dinner or go play golf or whatever. There's a bunch of other functions that happen at Mar-a-Lago, as well as Trump's residence. It's not just some palace for him. It's a business enterprise. But Epstein gets banned from basically all Trump properties. And this is before his first conviction for two young, what's going on. Anybody who had any serious dealings with, obviously he may call somebody on the phone, Epstein, but anybody who continues to have any serious businesses, continues to hang out with, continues to go to some island with, continues to fly in some airplane owned by Epstein, after that first conviction, you should have nothing to do with him or her, and they should have nothing to do in public life. And public life is being a CEO of a major corporation. Meaning whether they did anything criminal or not, I don't know. But because they continue to associate with somebody who was convicted of that at such a high level, they can just retire. Even if they truly did nothing wrong with nobody ever, just because they were associated with him after that first conviction, that he spent some time in, and then got out. Anybody who has anything to do with him after that should be removed from public life, whether it's entertainment, whether it's industry, whether it's politics. They can go, sit on a beach somewhere if they're rich. If they're poor, they can go get a job at, McDonald's or delivering Amazon deliveries or some crap like that. They should be nothing to do with public life ever again. Anybody. But if you were involved before that conviction, I can believe, unless you give me other evidence, I can believe he was just a fixer. He was just, hey, make a contact. Hey, somebody in the Czech government? I want to, somebody great. Can you hook me up with him? There's all kinds of those people running around the world. Some are scummy, some aren't. But that's just, can you hook me up with a connection somewhere to do something? Again, nothing needs to be illegal about any of that. Just, who do you know that can get something done? And yeah, okay, so he Epstein apparently was that. So before the first conviction, just because somebody emailed back and forth, depends on what they were emailing about, but just, in contact with Epstein, photographed with Epstein prior to that first conviction, I can get, without further evidence, I mean, if you give me other evidence, that's a different matter. But without further evidence, I can go, yeah, you knew a guy who you may know is, a bit of a schemer, a bit of a whatever, but you don't necessarily know that the real problems. Anybody after that first conviction continues association, no. Whatever party, whatever, anything. Okay, long-term professionally trained, yes, yeah, absolutely, Lipsid. Okay, I find it hard to believe that all it takes is a V-Groove. You can train people in a couple of months. I'm sorry, no, you can't. It takes 1,000 hours for you to become an expert on something. That's I know it's just sort of a big round number, and I don't know what it is. But you do something for 1,000 hours, and I'm not saying I'm great at it, but obviously I'm able to entertain a certain amount of people on the interwebs, and at least one company pays me routinely to stream their stuff because I can talk history and play their game. Obviously, I'm not actively playing at the moment, but at this game, it needs 1,000 hours. It needs a certain amount of innate talent. I don't know how great I'm a speaker. I don't know. I'm not even saying great at all, but meaning I don't know how good I am, but I'm not terrible at this stuff. But I also have many more than 1,000 hours of study to know world history and details, military things and whatnot that all bring it together to hopefully be an interesting package. Obviously not terribly because I don't have very many people watching. I'm about 20 right now. And there'll be a few more watch later on, I know. But it takes a lot, and even with all the hours that I've done, and I do think there was, at least in the past, suppression on YouTube and Twitch, but obviously I'm not good enough to become I'm not saying like 10,000, 100,000 people watching me. I'm even saying 200-300 people watching me live. There is a certain amount of innate talent, and discovering people with innate talent, meaning you might have somebody who's doing Amazon deliveries, or back in World War II doing like milk deliveries to the house, that might have the innate talent to be a great welder. Needs training, but might have that. And he doesn't discover it. The company does, industrial production, because it's never really tried out. So you've got to find and work your way to find people that have talents and then train them. It takes a while, and it takes a lot of people to produce a lot of things fast, even in this modern world. If you look at, I remember watching some videos that they were going over the process of taking an Abrams tank, completely disassembling it, ripping out every single wire in that tank as part of its disassembly, and reassembling it with other things too, but also checking out all the parts, all the moving parts, to make sure they weren't worn too much. If they were worn a certain amount, they would put a new piece on it. whatever the piece was, but they were rewiring it with fiber optics instead of copper wire. And that was saving hundreds of pounds of copper wire were being removed, that the fiber optics wire was just going to be a lot less weight on that vehicle. Just the wiring. And how many people to train to do that efficiently takes time. And so you have to have that infrastructure build up. And you have to have, and I've known people that could do a job great, whatever the job was, but they could not effectively teach somebody to do the job. Now, if somebody was talented enough, they could watch the person and maybe ask the right questions that the guy could answer, interpret, and become good at doing that job. But being a teacher of a thing is different than being able to do the thing. You have to be able to do the thing well enough and then be able to have the skills to teach doing the thing. So just because you've got 20 good welders at a place, oh, I know there's machine welding too and whatnot, but whatever. Doesn't mean that those 20 people can take time out of their day to train up more people. And if all those 20 people, maybe they all suck as trainers. So who are you going to get to train the replacement? It just isn't that easy. It really isn't. Okay, better the uniform. You can have hundreds of artisans, ones that you can have tens of. What I don't quite get that. You're creating native supply of vehicles, mechanics, people experience using. Yes, I presume that's back when we were talking about Japan. Germans were on the right track with the Goliath in World War II. Yeah, that's another example of a drone. But they were on the right track, but you notice that the drone is a single use, gets destroyed when it gets used. Almost every museum has one. And there's pictures of Americans riding around in a little drone, Goliath sitting on top of it, sort of open. They capture lots of them. There's something about the drone that doesn't quite work, because again, if it worked, it would have been destroyed. We'd have lots of Goliath bits and pieces, wheels, track pieces, whatever, that would have been thrown around when it blew up. So yeah, they were on the right track, but I don't know quite whether it just wasn't, because it's basically something that's meant to be guided to a target, like a tank, to blow up under it, or like, there's a machine gun position over in that building. Let's drive a Goliath over that building and blow up next to the building, and that will collapse the building and will, just like a farmhouse, nothing super sturdy, but enough to collapse it and whatever. So they capture a lot for a single use. I'm trying to stay away from the word to get me demonetized here on YouTube. So single use destruction of the thing. So they captured a lot, but you're definitely right that is heading into drone warfare. Another example of it. Yes, absolutely. Okay, wasn't there a robot pack mule concept? Oh, yes. Yes, there have been that. Having to maintain a factory lines when not offloading costs via arms trades is trades of production. Oh, yes, that's part of, because a lot of, look, I do not believe at the budgets that they maintained, the German Leopard program for Germany could have been maintained. I don't have the facts in front of me. Had it not been doing non-NATO sales. I know, like, one of the nations that bought some Leopards was Singapore. And they've actually, I think, they have a small training field here, but they actually train in some other nations, including off the continent of Asia, that they have just training agreements that they'll put the Leopards on some roll-on, roll-off ship, sail to like America or somewhere, drive them, do the training around there, and then bring them back to Singapore. But going to some of these other, whether, some of like Saudi Arabia, selling to Saudi Arabia or whoever, I do not believe that the Leopard would have stayed in production had it been for some of their non-NATO sales. and Korea to maintain their tank production. Obviously, are selling a bunch, and will also set up production in Poland. But even setting up production does sort of mean the company that makes the, what is it, the K2 or whatever it's called, the Korean tank, um, means that that company's making money, so it can pad maintaining the facility in Korea. Meaning if it's making enough money there, oh hey, we're sort of, whether it's at a loss temporarily or whether it's barely making any money. Oh well, we're getting money from licensing that out. So yes, there's a lot of it. Hey Thomas, how you doing? I remember to break your name up properly. Hi, Germany and others might need their own nukes, but they signed a non-proliferation treaty and they're thinking about it. Yeah, I've heard that recently, since we're sort of in modern world talk element of my current streams. Um, no, I do not think the current German government is entirely just a follow on. Obviously, the Kaiser's government ends in World War One, or at the end thereof, and then the National Socialist government rises up to replace it. But I still see with Germany a desire to organize the world. Now they want to do it peacefully currently, but they get frustrated when things don't go out their way. And partially what I can see is like wanting to organize up because they have lots of loans or whatever to Greece and other countries, that their economies are not well managed, their government spending is not well managed. So Germany wants to I see German character in government expressed in multiple ways, that they feel they need to manage other people's shit. Okay? Instead of being like, oh, hey, the Swiss, oh, hey, we got everything worked out here. Oh, you're living in chaos somewhere? Oh, okay, cool. Have fun with that. Just don't let it come to us. Like Italy's government, post World War II has been chaotic until more recently. Because back in the 80s when I was in college, or early 90s, at that time they had literally had more governments in Italy than years since World War II. Because some governments only lasted, a few months and then had to do a new election. Other governments lasted multiple years, but on average it was about one government per year and constantly shifting around. So that's a bit chaotic for Europe and whatnot. So yeah, Germany still hasn't gotten to the idea that it can leave others alone and go, oh yeah, I'll loan you money, Greece. Oh, you're defaulting on the loan. Well, too bad. Whatever, do your own shit. No, they want to come in and reorganize the Greek things. So giving them nukes is not just going to, they're not going to be Germany 3.0, 1.0 World War 1, 2.0 World War 2, 3.0 World War 3 or something. It's not quite that. And I think Japan has also learned a lesson that empire is not needed. Oh, maybe strong allies and working on things, but I don't see I see a lot of Japan's hated enemies, or people who hate Japan, the Koreans, the Chinese, the Filipinos. Now, as the World War II generations die off, I say generations even as, kids or whatever, or people who are not old enough to actually remember but had their parents talking about it dying off, and Japan's current behavior, that it may show that Japan is actually going to be a very good ally to those primarily not Chinese, but also not Russian, not whoever. So they might be a very good ally. And if you go off the rails, they'll just stop being your ally, which has never really gone on the rails, but like Vietnam. Vietnam, I see, is trying to become a modern non-communist state, but they still have a communist party in charge that needs to go. Unfortunately, I'm not advocating that everything needs to be democratic. I don't advocate that at all. But I also think keeping that name communist in your title of your ruling governing function means you haven't learned the lesson that communism is evil. Okay? So the Vietnamese Communist Party, or whatever it would be called officially in English, I'm not going to try, even if I heard it, try to pronounce it in Vietnamese, but whatever the official translation of it is, so long as they keep that communist in that title, they're still not accepting that what they did was evil. Now, I know it may also be nationalistic, which isn't evil. You may practice nationalism evilly, but just nationalism of itself, in and of itself, isn't evil. So, like having Vietnamese in your party, your ruling party name, isn't an evilness. So long as they continue to not acknowledge that communism was a mistake, was a dark chapter in Vietnam, I would only treat with them on a limited basis. I would not give them any technological capabilities. I mean, even minor ones. Just fuck them. I know they're a good counterbalance to China, and they're having lots of conflicts, both border conflicts, both local or regional geopolitical conflicts, like Cambodia has been, though it's maybe it's going to break away, has been a Chinese, somewhere between puppet or ally or whatever. The Pol Pot was sort of aligned with China, and that's why Vietnam invades them in 76 or whatever, to stop the madness. And China eventually goes to war with Vietnam in 1979, whatever the years with Pol Pot, I forget. But they eventually, and maybe the Vietnamese communist government isn't the worst on the planet, but even if it was the best, it being the best of the evil ones or the whatever, is still not good. So so Japan may write off or not go in and do too much to defend Vietnam because of that, but it's looking to be a good neighbor. So if they were to, because they've been reopening their nuclear power plants that they closed after Fukushima, they closed all of them down. Now they've reopened some of them because some of them might still be in too dangerous of a situation, that if there is another earthquake with tsunami, that is going to cause problems, meltdowns or whatever. But there are lakes and other ways to get enough cooling water for a nuclear power plant, and if you build it with good shutdown capabilities, if there is when there is another major earthquake, to be able to handle it. So maybe more responsibly dealing with nuclear power. So they have the fissionable material enough to go to nuclear weapons. So I don't quite fear them having nuclear weapons. I will tell you one thing. If Germany gets nuclear weapons, one of two things is happening. And again, I know nobody listens to me. I repeat, and a few people here who do, but and I'm not saying agree with me or do my advice, but listens to me. If Germany is getting nuclear weapons, it means one of two things. One, the EU, or they've recognized that the EU is going to be a dying platform. Because if the EU isn't dying, Germany doesn't need nuclear weapons, because France, a member of the EU, and is, I believe, the EU, if it continues down the plan that those that are organizing up the European project back in the 50s, which is trying to get rid of nationalism, because they see nationalism as the main reason for World War I and World War II. And so nationalism, they believe, is an evil. Not just extreme nationalism, but just nationalism. The idea that you are proud of something that you belong to, whether it's an ethnic group, a language group, a particular region, people that are left-handed, or whatever it is. You are proud to be a fill in the blank. That sort of nationalism. That you're proud of a flag. That you're proud of a slogan. You're proud of something like that. That is what they believe caused all those deaths and all those in those two big wars and wars before them. But so they believe in the United States of the world, ultimately, I think. Ultimately, now that's maybe hundreds of years down the road as the plan. But in the United States of Europe, in which it's not going to be Americanism. You're not going to, wear cowboy hats and shoot guns off in the air every 5 minutes. But so it's not going to be America, but it will be a European version of America. But even that European part, as we see with Merkel and others, everybody who shows up here is equally part of this group, wherever they're from, whether it's from Africa, Afghanistan, Mars, whoever. You're all invited to this thing. Just we bureaucratically organize it up, and more bureaucratism is better than the emotions of people in political parties, because the bureaucrats, the experts, will work out the economies and work out everything else. It'll just be up to the experts. It'll be acknowledged that because one major member, France, has that, Britain's left, and they may believe eventually Britain will come back, but the European project is not going to happen in any time soon. And if anything, it's going to fall apart. But if it doesn't fall apart, immediately it's falling apart. So that's one thing if Germany gets nukes. Or two, its view that Germany views itself as the center of the European project. And the nukes are out of control from Germany because Germany knows how to organize everybody up. And Germany knows the best way to organize things up. Germany, no, they're not going to be those wacky racists, but they're going to be organization bureaucrats from hell. And they need their finger on that nuclear button because they can't trust France. France is not going to be trustworthy enough. They've got to have it. Because so long as you have either a reliable NATO, with or without the US, and so long as you have a reliable supranationalistic organization, I think I'm saying something from Mary Poppins, but no, supranationalistic organization, like the EU, and a major power in the EU has nuclear weapons, there's no reason for Germany to have nuclear weapons. Because if you need more nukes, meaning we only have enough to blow up Romania, we don't have enough to blow up Hungary too, France can just build more. Okay? And of course, Germany, who I know somebody did mention the idea of them getting nuclear weapons. Germany has shut down all of its nuclear power plants to the point that the green members of the cabinet that were in charge of the energy program or minister or whatever, ministry, went so far as to ensure the destruction of the nuclear power plants. So if a future government wanted to have nuclear power, they can't unless they want to start building plants, which takes 10, 20 years or something to build up a modern plant of any significant size. So they cannot produce nuclear weapons on their own. They have to use somebody like France or America or Britain or Russia or China to get their nuclear material. Why Britain maintains the nuclear power plants is because they want to maintain nuclear weapons. Why France maintains nuclear power plants? One, they know it's good power, unlike Britain, who just mostly maintains, they want to do solar and renewables or blah, 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 net zeros that are not nuclear, but they maintain it for their nuclear weapons. France knows that it's smart power, plus they want to maintain nuclear weapons. So Germany, who's decided not to have power plants, so unless they're buying either materials and or the weapons from somebody else, they can't have nukes right now physically. They have to build the plants to be able to make the nuclear weapons. And so they're only going to do that is if they don't trust France to be the enforcers, you know. Bulgaria, if you leave EU, we're going to nuke Sofia. You better not leave, or you'll see a mushroom cloud over your capital or someplace. You know, maybe your national monument somewhere will get nuked. Because, again, for defensive arrangements, France should be enough. So, yeah. So one of two things. Either they think that the EU is falling apart, and so they need nukes because France will be an independent country, have maybe a different foreign policy at some point, you know, because, hey, Poland and Poland and Germany are in the way of Russia, so we don't have to fight in some war. We can stay out of it. You know, so Germany will feel it needs it. Or it wants to dominate the EU and it needs nukes to do so. One of the two. Okay, yes. I'm going to try to catch up with the chat here. I think the moment Germany would be energy independent fusion power. Well, fusion is coming, guys. Thomas, everybody, yes, fusion is coming. I just think it's not how to travel faster than light. I don't know. And supposedly somebody's doing a new set of math. It had been the Alcubierre drive that was a warp type engine that supposedly the math held up. I don't know how you create the warp, but it would need so much energy. It would be like burning several planets all at once to create it. So obviously there's no way we're going to be able to do that. We just don't have this much energy in the solar system. So, but supposedly somebody's doing new math. So that's still sort of in the realm of science fiction. We don't know how to do it in the sense that it's completely like something beyond our real grasp. I think fusion is just technical hurdles, not whether it can happen or not. Because obviously they have had it happen for like microseconds, but we've not been able to really sustain it as far as I know. But I think that's just a technical capability, not a fantastical capability changes. So it's coming, but that's different than nuclear weapons. That's just energy. I don't think fusion allows for big bombs. I don't think, but I don't know. I'm not that kind of scientist. Hello, you lad 88. How you doing? Wow, not playing Black Lights. No, not at the moment. Also, People's Republic. Yes, People's Republic is sort of a euphemism for communism. A republic can mean many different things. Okay. Republic, res publica. I thought that was Latin, though Plato has his Republic dialogues. I don't know quite the origin, or I don't know what Plato would have maybe used a different term for his book in Koine or Greece or Greek at the time. But I think it was Koine, but I don't know. There's different versions of Greek language back then. You can have different types of republic, but republic is sort of a structured government. The United States is not a democracy, people. I know we sort of borrowed that term in World War II. The United States is a constitutional federal republic. Yes, it has representative elements that are voted into office, but we are a constitution. We have to follow the Constitution. It takes great hurdles to change that Constitution. A majority of the people in the country can want to change the Constitution, but if all the states, or if enough of the states, not all of them, there's only 50, but if enough of the states don't agree, the Constitution doesn't change. Because if all the people in Texas and all the people in California and all the people in New York State and a couple other big states, and then a smattering of people everywhere else want to change the Constitution. The small states have enough say, like let's say if they want to apportion senators based on the population size of the state or something like that. The small states will just say, fuck no, because we want to have equal representation in the Senate. And so there might be overwhelming popular support, but if you don't get enough of the states, and it's not just a majority, I forget, I think it's like 2/3 or more of the states to agree, you have to do that. So you have to go through all kinds of hurdles to change the Constitution, and we've done it in minor ways, because even minor ways are, giving women the vote explicitly, because in the previous Constitution it doesn't say they don't vote. It just didn't say, but guaranteeing the women to vote. It was sort of up to each state, I believe, if they voted. In most states, just why have women vote? Back then, but it becomes a constitutional imperative that they are allowed to vote, or making sure that we don't have certain types of slavery. That's in the Constitution. It wasn't guaranteed. It was nowhere in the Constitution said you could have slaves. It just didn't say you couldn't have slaves. So it's been changed. Obviously, they banned alcohol in the Constitution, and then they unbanned alcohol in the Constitution. So, we've changed the Constitution in minor ways, but not in major ways. So we are a constitutional federal republic, not a democracy. The majority of the people don't get to rule. They just don't. There's all kinds of stuff. It's not one man, one vote, because there's a lot more people voting for a senator in California than vote for a senator in Alaska, and both states each get to send 2 senators to the Senate. That is not democratic. No, they're elected people, but it's not democratically equal. And the senators cannot pass laws that are unconstitutional. And and it's not even, doesn't even say in the Constitution who determines what's constitutional or not. It's sort of court cases that the Supreme Court does get to exist. That's in the Constitution, but the sort of precedent is that the Supreme Court does get to determine that. It's sort of precedent. And there's only one court established in the Constitution, the Supreme Court. No other courts, if my reading of the Constitution is correct and memory is correct. It's only the Supreme Court is in the Constitution. It does say in the Constitution other courts that the Congress can establish. So if the Congress wants to get rid of other federal courts, it's not talking about state courts, if they want to get rid of other courts, they can do so. They can get rid of all the federal courts if they want to do so and just have the Supreme Court. So yeah, it's not a democracy, people. But People's Republic sort of defines things in practice, if not in legalistic terms, that are, speaking of a arbitrary party, arbitrary republic that goes to the whims of so-called people. Who's making that up? Who's doing that kind of stuff? So yes, that is. The modern designs for plants exist and not focused on refining for weapons, but will be making modern plants. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, I know there's different types of nuclear power plants that some can and some basically can't. I'm not a nuclear scientist. I've just watched documentaries at different times. One was a documentary on the British nuclear power to get it, and they've actually at times done more expensive power plants than needed, just so that it would produce the right fissionable material. And it also produced power, but it was much more expensive than had they done cheaper power plants that wouldn't have been set up to do the right fissionable material. So, both produced power, but also produced nuclear weapons grade material. So, Germany, I don't know what power plants they had. I don't know if they're going to renuclearize for their power plants, they probably should. France did have a lot of influence up in this part of the world until recently, even though they gave it independence. But this has access to a lot of nuclear material that they used. Also, there's nuclear material down here that's in chaos. France may have a problem because of some of those losses. This is sort of an undeclared war between France and Russia is going on down here, if you people don't know. There are Russian units that are operating down here that have driven out French units. France has had to abandon a few of the countries. I don't quite know how much they control their nuclear, the production of their nuclear materials. They might become more dependent on the U.S., which does have the ability, does have the uranium or whatever in the ground, and other sources of it. So that is a strategic problem for France. Okay, let's see. We're going to end this here in just a moment, but with waste becoming only a little but very radioactive that quickly breaks down, also being able to reuse material for power, but opposite directions from refining for nukes. Yes. Oh, yes. No, I cannot speak intelligently unless I, open books or Wikipedia articles or whatever on all that. But generally speaking, we don't build nuclear power plants in sheds like they did in Chernobyl. Do it in hardened facilities. We can generally store the nuclear waste material or reuse it or various things well enough until it breaks down, until it's not too pollutive, and we can easily find places on the planet away from fault, nuclear or earthquake fault lines, that we can store the stuff, that until it's cheap enough that if we want to get rid of it, we can put it into space and shoot it towards the sun, which will get rid of it responsibly in time. 100 years from now, meaning we can store up all we need to store up until we decide if we don't want it on the planet anymore to, send it to the sun or something, or just set it out in deep space somewhere, not hurting anybody or anything. So nuclear power is currently doable. It will take a few years to build a plant. But until fusion is actually reliable, because a lot of these people rely upon proposed ideas. Well, we'll just wait until fusion works. We'll just do, Elon Musk is a big solar proponent. Solar has a lot of costs. Solar has a lot of dirty material to make. Solar might be a good, definitely has a good use for a distributed network, in that without building lots of power lines, having each farmhouse or whatever have its own small solar panels up, might have some of that be good, but is might be good at large scale, but even that may be better, which Japan is experimenting with, having solar panels in space and beam the energy down to Earth. I think energy, which is one of the critical elements, or the critical element in modern life, will become cheap, whether through fusion, through other things. I do think as an currently available intermediate program, nuclear power is a good way to go until some of these future powers are actually at scale producing well. Not just do we have a fusion plant somewhere that's working and actually producing more energy to go out on an electrical grid than it's costing to be maintained. Okay, that's great. But how long until we get that formula of production down to where we can spam those all over the planet? That kind of thing. So until that's a reality, I would say keep going with nuclear power plant. Okay, well, I'm going to try to pronounce Ellipsid. Again, thank you for being here. Ulad, Thomas, repeat, Strong Arm, Arno, I know you're still around. Challenger Boys, Jamnuska, if you're still there. Plastic Gangster, Eric, if you're still around. Thank you all. I'm sure I'm missing a few people. Turin Low, thank you for hanging out with me today. Listen to me go on. Robert Coleman, um, General Field Marshal, and everybody, thank you for hanging out with me. I hope it's been interesting. I know we've been sort of going down a little bit in the last 20 minutes or so. But yeah, thank you all. We'll be back tomorrow with War Thunder. I know it doesn't get as many views, but it's fun to play with friends. So you're invited to play with us or just hang out and watch and chat with us. And then no streams for Slytherin for me next week, but the week after, I think I have like 3 streams in the week and 2 on Monday of that week. Next week. So I will be on Slytherin next week quite a bit. So thank you all. What's the last chat? Yes. Yes, I will try to have a great rest today. You guys have a great day or evening as it may be. And I'll be back. So thank you all. So see you guys. Yes, War Thunder fun, detailed level, but not really played since COVID. Yeah, you just need to hang out. You don't have to play with us, or you could come and play with us. We will, at least for a mission or two, if you get there early enough. Not maybe just as we're ending. Um, Play a mission or two, or maybe the whole time, depending on how many people show up. If we do go back to getting enough people again, we'll do custom battles, and we'll sort of go, yeah, this BR Germany versus America kind of thing, so that we just do World War II vehicles or something like that. Have some cool custom battles. If we get enough people, but if not, we'll just be the random battles. So